Chapter 984. The antimatter universe, on the other side of the multiverse, was the end of all matter. This was the universe under the control of the anti-watcher, the end of all positive matter. There was no way to verify who created this universe. Its existence was older than the oldest records. There were intelligent beings here, and they regarded the anti-watcher as the only god of their world. They worshipped him day after day, offering everything they had, just so that he could leave this universe with a chance of survival. Today, in the eyes of countless worshippers, a loud rumble rang out, and an unfamiliar visitor flew out of the orange passage. He tore through space and entered the antimatter universe without any obstruction. The visitor sat on the Mobius chair, his gaze wise and full of sympathy. It was Thea's old colleague, the god of knowledge, Mitron. He flew to a giant golden tower filled with technology, his expression grim, looking at the anti-watcher who was observing the material world through the tower, and fell silent, as if he was preparing his words. "Hello, Mobius," he greeted the anti-watcher. The anti-watcher had barely escaped from his near-death state, and his tall body was covered in a thick layer of armor. The armor was forged in the core of the antimatter universe, but the armor did not provide him with much protection, and instead exposed his weakness. "I remember I warned you, Mitron, not to call me that, not to mention that name in front of me." The anti-watcher's voice was very hoarse. "Do you want me to call you the anti-watcher?" Mitron was not afraid, sitting on the chair as he asked calmly. "I hope you don't disturb me." The anti-watcher's left hand lit up with a fierce light, and a beam of energy wrapped in a destructive aura shot towards Mitron. The violent energy hit the Mobius chair, the chair that the anti-watcher had created to seek knowledge when he was still a mortal called Mobius. The energy was turbulent and violent, but Mitron could still see the thick weakness in it, and he waved his hand to brush away the dust. "You should know that as long as I'm sitting on this chair, your antimatter cannot hurt me." The anti-watcher was wearing a mask, and his expression could not be seen. He only said dully, "I know, I've been sitting on that chair countless times longer than you." "Yes, that's right. You abandoned the chair and wanted to destroy the universe. Let's not talk about the chair today. I'm here to advise you. Reality is already extremely fragile. It can't withstand your destruction. Stop for now. Don't enter the real world." Mitron was trying to persuade Kieran, which was not exactly a brilliant job. The anti-watcher sneered contemptuously. "Even if you're sitting on this chair, you're still ignorant. After billions of years, you haven't made any progress. You don't even realize the laws of the universe. Anyone would get angry if they were called bullshit." Mitron was a little upset. He had good intentions. "How dare you say that to him?" His voice rose 2 octaves. "Don't enter the real world. There is a trap set by the goddess of death for you. Can't you see? If you stop now, we can work together. I'm willing to help you find out what's behind all this. I'll use all my power to change your past and return everything to how it was in the beginning. Please believe me." Mitron sounded a little agitated at the end, but he really wanted to help. "Pitiful worm, your knowledge comes from this chair, and you don't have that kind of power." The anti-watcher was unmoved. He put on his cloak tiredly, like a warrior about to enter the battlefield. "Stop." Mitron blocked his path. "If you enter the real world, do you know who's waiting for you? Why are you so stubborn? Darkseid? Or the goddess of death? Or the heavenly father you serve?" The anti-watcher's words shocked Mitron. For the first time, he felt a little worried about this conversation. He realized that the conversation was out of his control. He had oversimplified the problem. There was probably a deeper game behind this. "They all want me to enter. Can you stop these wills? Get out of my way." Boom. There was a loud bang, and the anti-watcher did not attack. Instead, a surge of energy came out of the Mobius chair. Mitron left the chair for the first time in hundreds of millions of years. He fell to the ground in a bloody mess, and his consciousness quickly stagnated. He could only vaguely see the anti-supervisor taking a small step in front of him, and a few intermittent words such as fate, cycle entered his ears. After that, the anti-supervisor no longer looked at him, this poor guy, and led the army to the material world without stopping. This was a barren planet in Earth's 3 evil universes. Thea could not affect the battle between the Spectre and Tien Sai, but she could choose the location of the battle between the Anti-Watcher and Darkseid. After the Spectre entered the battle, she left a passage in the universe. As long as she entered this universe, she would definitely appear on this planet. Both sides' battlefields were already set up, and all that was left was for the two contestants to enter. Darkseid coveted the anti-life equation. The Anti-Watcher's goal was purer. He wanted to be reborn, to escape his fate of destroying the universe. Fate had a strong hold on him, and he needed to break through the boundaries of reality. To do so, he needed to kill a new god, a god who could touch the origin of all things. Darkseid, who had the Omega effect, was his only target. The conflict between both sides was irreconcilable, and only the fall of one side could end everything. Thea added fuel to the fire, the Heavenly Father acquiesced, and many archangels and great demons had their own agendas before the battle was finally decided. As the main contributor to this battle, the two powerful beings of the multiverse who were about to fight to the death also tacitly agreed to her choice of battlefield. A barren planet was more convenient for killing each other. The Apocalypse Star's army had entered this universe through the only passage a minute ago. Darkseid did not appear until the Anti-Watcher entered the universe and entered the battlefield. His subordinates did not find anything amiss. Only then did he open his mother box and descend into this universe. The Wasteland Wolf led the Apocalypse Star's army and faced off against the Anti-Watcher's elite forces. The moment the two sides clashed, the battlefield was littered with corpses. Neither the Anti-Watcher nor Darkseid made a move. They were sizing each other up and waiting for the Goddess of Death and the Spectre to leave this universe. If the young mistress did not leave, the two of them would not dare to fight without restraint. What is that? It's as evil as Tien Sai, and it seems to be two different types of energy. Diana had barely touched the top level of the new gods. She could vaguely feel the world's consciousness cheering as two sources of evil had descended into this universe. Chapter 985. Thea pretended to be confused. One of them is Darkseid, but the other one is very blurry. It looks like the Anti-Watcher who escaped during the Night of Darkness. He has been watching us all this time. What should we do? Superman asked. They were too far away, and even with his supervision, he could not see across several galaxies. Of course, Sia could not say that they should just sit back and watch the show. She pondered for a moment and said, "It's a good thing that their battle is not on Earth. A battle of this level is not something that can be decided in a short period of time. I think Darkseid has a good chance of winning. Darkseid is also our enemy, right? What will happen to this universe if he wins?" The Flash asked. This time, Thea thought about it carefully. Even if he wins, he will use up half of his divine power. We new gods are fundamentally different from the Anti-Watcher. Even by the most objective estimation, Darkseid will be seriously injured and will not be able to recover in a short time. In fact, she was thinking that Darkseid should go into seclusion after obtaining the anti-life equation. He could conquer the world any time. Sharpening the axe would not delay the work of cutting firewood. Uncle Da would know this simple path. He did not care about this little bit of time. Everyone in the Righteous Alliance looked at each other. They had sacrificed themselves to fight against Counter-Supervisor, but in the end, they found that the big boss had been pulled away by someone else, and the one pulling the monster was another big boss. They were a little dumbfounded by this complicated situation. Even Batman, who had prepared 100 plans, did not expect this situation. Right now, the Anti-Watcher that they wanted to eliminate had been called to the side by Darkseid for a fight. What should they do in this situation? Batman did not like things to get out of hand. The other party was too far away, and he could not see or touch them. He could only focus on what was in front of him. He pointed at the Spectre Eclipse fighting on the screen and asked, "Who are these two people? Where is your counterpart?" Thea told the story of her counterpart from the beginning. The hero's side, but they weren't too surprised. Superman's counterpart and the Flash's counterpart were so bad that it wasn't too surprising to have Thea's counterpart. Young boys and girls who thirsted for power opened up some ruins and were then possessed by demons. This kind of common story filled countless movies, animations, and games. It wasn't anything new, so they accepted it very quickly. Apart from the fact that this demon seemed to have a powerful background, everything else was understandable. Only Batman had a different train of thought. He scratched his chin. Part of the creator's emotions? Can you be more specific? Thea smiled bitterly. This has nothing to do with our current situation. Your thirst for knowledge has broken through a certain limit. Bruce, this is not good. You have strayed far from your original intention. Really? Batman lowered his head and thought about it. He did not find any problems, but he had been searching for answers too much recently. The secret of the new god, the secret of the lamp ring, the secret of the N-metal. There were too many things to study, and many of them lacked basic information. This information was too far away from his world, so there was no progress in many of them. I'll go help the Spectre. You guys pack up. This mission is officially over. Thea joined the battle between the Spectre and the Spectre Eclipse. They had to fight quickly. Darkseid and the anti-supervisor were trying to kill each other with their gazes, but neither of them made a move. Thea soon understood their concerns. She could only join the battle again and quickly seal the Spectre Eclipse. Then, she returned to the original universe to watch their livestream. The Spectre Eclipse was already weaker than the Spectre Eclipse. With Thea joining the battle, the Spectre Eclipse was even less of a match. The Spectre Eclipse said that Thea could be his host, which meant that their powers could be partially connected. At this time, both the Spectre Eclipse and the Spectre Eclipse were 5 meters tall. To cooperate with the battle, Thea also enlarged her body. She held the Night Sky Sword and slashed the Spectre Eclipse's shadow attack. "Cooperate with me, Goddess of Death," the Spectre Eclipse said. As the Spectre Eclipse spoke, a patch of green appeared in her palm. It contained a trace of supreme power. She had been studying the Stranger's silver coin and the Judas contract. She immediately felt the purity that was beyond words. Since the Spectre Eclipse wanted to fight, she would not refuse. Thea put away her sword and jumped behind the Spectre Eclipse. She patted the Spectre Eclipse's shoulder and transferred part of her death power. The green beam of light was surrounded by a spiral of black death gas. Like a high-speed drill, it pierced through the Spectre Eclipse's shield and pierced a big hole in his abdomen. The death power and the Spectre of God's vengeance worked well together for the first time. Thea estimated that if she became the Spectre Eclipse's host, the two powers would combine and there would not be many people in the world who could defeat her. Even if the Spectre Eclipse was summoned by the cult of death-seeking again, she and the Spectre Eclipse would be able to take it down. However, the Spectre Eclipse belonged to the Spectre Eclipse. At her level, it would be too low to be the host. The Spectre Eclipse had transformed Black Thea's body into a pure energy body. Not a single drop of blood was shed. However, the death power and vengeance Eclipse's wounds were giving him a headache. "You are indeed powerful. But Death Goddess, do you dare to look me in the eye? Your counterpart is still struggling in my body. Come and help her." The Spectre Eclipse's voice was very soft, as if he was mumbling. Thea hid behind the Spectre Eclipse without a word. She would have to be an idiot to look him in the eye. Even an idiot would know that this was a big move. As for the part of Black Thea's soul that was trapped, she could only pray for the best. Her shameless actions almost made the Spectre Eclipse spit out blood. The little bit of God's power he had hit the Spectre Eclipse. Since they were both from the same department, the Spectre Eclipse was naturally not afraid of this thing. She accepted it calmly and even absorbed a part of it. This made the Spectre Eclipse's heart ache. The Spectre Eclipse raised her fists and fought desperately in the front. Thea Eclipse attacked from behind from a distance. She was determined not to be on the front line. Under their rapid attacks, the Spectre Eclipse's counterattacks became weaker and weaker. He was not a match for the Spectre Eclipse in the first place, and Thea Eclipse was even weaker. After a lot of effort, they finally destroyed the Spectre Eclipse's new body. The Sky Eclipse turned back into a sparkling and translucent black diamond that seemed to contain countless secrets. The Spectre Eclipse did not have any objections to Thea Eclipse's plan to seal her predecessor again. If she wanted to seal him, then seal him. He would definitely be able to jump out again. This was the difference between 100 years and 150 years. The battle on Earth 3 came to an end when she sealed the Heart of Darkness into a large rock. This large rock could not be brought back to Earth 1. After some thought, she decided to leave it in this part of the universe. She randomly chose a direction and found a planet with a very poor environment that would not give birth to life in 10,000 years. Then, she buried it deep. Chapter 986. The army from Earth 1 entered this world and raided Earth 3 under the banner of Help the People Hang Upside Down. Unlike the development of Mars, the resources here were all ready-made. All they had to do was open the warehouses and move them away. A large amount of resources, energy, and technology were transported back to Earth. The military and government were overjoyed. However, the politicians did not just plunder. They sent out their elite troops to help the government stabilize the situation. Overall, they had done a lot of good things. Super Tyrant, Super Queen, the Divine Power Ring were captured, Night Owl, Deathstorm, and Ocean Overlord were missing, and Lex and Johnny Quick were dead. Eternal Justice was a complete success. They did not achieve their initial goal of eliminating the anti-supervisor, but no one objected when someone was willing to help. The moment Thea left Earth 3, Darkseid and the anti-supervisor attacked at the same time. Darkseid's divine power was at its peak. Apart from Yojia Khan, who was still stuck to the Wall of Origin, he represented the pinnacle of the new gods. The Heavenly Father was no match for him, and Sia was no match for him. At least for now, Darkseid was confident. If the anti-supervisor was at his peak, he could easily defeat Darkseid. After all, he could absorb all the energy in the universe, and there was no upper limit. On the other hand, the new gods could only fuse with the origins, and they could not fuse with many of them. For example, the anti-supervisor was in the Shenxia world, while the new gods were in the Wuxia world. At most, the new gods were in the Wuxia world. The martial arts they practiced were not on the same level. If the anti-supervisor was at his peak, he could kill Uncle Da in 2 moves. Unfortunately, he was not in his best condition. However, he was not here to die. With the anti-life equation in hand, he had the power to destroy everything. Only by killing Darkseid and using the violent turbulence in the material world could he break free from the shackles of fate. However, Darkseid did not easily leave Apocalypse Planet and fight in his true form. Now, with the help of several parties, the anti-supervisor was finally standing in front of Darkseid. Only by killing this evil tyrant could he break free from his identity as the anti-supervisor and become a human again, not a program that only knew how to destroy. The Anti-Watcher's armor had 2 thick energy pipes extending from the inside of its body. They were connected to the anti-life equation and could be used freely under normal circumstances. However, after being killed by the Black Death Emperor, the Anti-Watcher's body had many necrotic parts. The energy pipes were used to bypass the necrotic parts and directly connect the energy to the wrist. He gathered the power to destroy everything in his hands. Once he regained control of this power, he was more confident that he could defeat Darkseid. The Grand Lord of Evil himself controlled the 5 divine thrones of darkness, evil, strength, tyranny, and massacre. Naturally, he could feel the pressure from the other party, which was greater than that of the new gods. However, he was not afraid. Instead, he was a little excited. Having lived for hundreds of millions of years, he could tell at a glance that the other party was weak. If he couldn't defeat such an enemy with only a sliver of health left, then he wouldn't be able to survive. TSK. Kai. Omega Ray was the first to attack. Once it did, it would unleash its strongest attack. 2 blood-red rays hit the Anti-Watcher's armor. As a powerful being of the multiverse, even Omega Ray couldn't do much to him. However, the armor shattered, revealing the stiff muscles on his shoulders. Darkseid was overjoyed, and he stopped probing. He let out a roar and threw a punch with enough force to suppress the stars in the sky. The Anti-Watcher opened his right hand, and the anti-life equation quickly gathered. A purple energy beam with a diameter of more than 3 meters was shot at Darkseid. Darkseid wasn't good at dodging. Perhaps it was because he didn't like dodging, or perhaps it was because his dexterity was low. In any case, Thea had fought him a few times, and she had never seen him dodge her attacks. He had never done anything like turning around, sidestepping, jumping, or rolling before. Thea suspected that this guy didn't even have the dodge attribute in his attribute list. He didn't even look at the anti-watcher's energy beam. He reached out his left hand and chose to take it head-on. At the same time, his right hand was like a huge mountain. His strategy was simple. He would trade damage for damage. Darkseid only had a sliver of health left, so he was sure to win. Sia looked at them from the outside and found that there was no technique involved in their battle. It was just you give me a shot, and I give you a punch. Let's see who falls first. Judging from the current situation, it was very likely that Darkseid would win. However, she couldn't rule out the possibility that the anti-life equation could turn the tables at the critical moment. After all, he now had the anti-life equation, which represented the ultimate power of the universe. As expected, after 5 minutes of fighting, the anti-watcher's armor was shattered in many places. One of Darkseid's eyes was injured, and blood was flowing down his cheek. At the same time, his left hand was charred. Antimatter energy wasn't easy to deal with. His mountain-like body was being eroded by the antimatter energy, but he suppressed it with his divine power. At this moment, Darkseid looked at the anti-watcher with a cruel smile. It was as if he was looking at a ferocious beast that had charged into a hunting net. In a world surrounded by wolves, even a bad guy wouldn't be able to survive. He didn't dare to let himself be injured too badly. If he was injured too badly, the Heavenly Father and Thea might join forces to attack the Apocalypse Star. He wouldn't be able to resist then. Darkseid secretly gave an order to the Wasteland Wolf. The Apocalypse Star commander hurriedly opened a sonic tunnel. A black figure quickly ran out of the tunnel. Or rather, it was a sleigh. He was wearing black armor. He was the new god, the Black Runner. The sleigh was extremely fast, leaving a trail of white mist behind it. He had received orders to take the anti-watcher's life. The Black Runner didn't attack the anti-life equation directly. The antimatter energy wasn't something he could resist. He patrolled the perimeter of the battlefield for 2 weeks, looking for an opportunity to strike. Darkseid suddenly discovered the anti-watcher's weakness. He shot an Omega Ray at the anti-watcher's face and appeared behind him at the same time. He clenched his fists and punched with all his might. When they got closer, Darkseid realized that the anti-life equation had been muttering to himself. He could only vaguely hear a few words: misunderstanding, guilt, shame, failure, stupidity, and so on. The language wasn't very refined, but it was very simple. There was also a strong sense of temptation in it. What is this? What is this guy doing? Darkseid suddenly had a bad feeling. He seemed to have underestimated the anti-life equation and the anti-watcher. The anti-life equation knew that Darkseid was in a bad state, but he still joined the battle. The anti-life equation had been planning this for a long time. Darkseid hurriedly turned around and saw that the Black Runner's eyes were filled with chaos and violence. The black sleigh suddenly sped up by 20%. It changed its angle slightly and charged straight at Darkseid. Chapter 987. The Black Runner's sudden betrayal caused many onlookers to gasp. They weren't worried about Darkseid, they were just thinking about how they should deal with the situation. Thea also saw this from the outside. She didn't care who won, but if possible, it would be best if Darkseid won. The anti-supervisor had a strong foundation and was 100% compatible with the anti-life equation. Although he had to destroy his martial arts and separate himself from the equation, what if he didn't? As the previous god of knowledge who had destroyed quite a number of universes, such a vicious and merciless enemy had been tricked by him. If he were to always be remembered by him, it would be quite unbearable. However, she wouldn't help him. They were too far apart, and Uncle Da could only rely on himself. The evil lord remained calm despite the sudden change. He didn't expect the Black Runner to be controlled by the enemy. He had planned for tens of thousands of years for the god of death, but Thea had ruined everything. His plan had been foiled before it could even begin. If there was anything he had gained from his plan, it would be the guy riding the sled. This guy claimed to be the god of death, but that was not the case at all. Darkseid could easily defeat him, and Wasteland Wolf could also take him down if he was prepared. After all, they had lived for so many years, and everyone had a few tricks up their sleeves. If the Black Runner was the god of death, then this god of death was too weak. Darkseid prepared for tens of thousands of years with this question in mind. It wasn't until Thea entered the underworld that he realized he had been fooled by the Black Runner's nonsense. This guy was definitely not the god of death. Although the Black Runner had all kinds of problems, Darkseid had studied him for tens of thousands of years and was certain of his abilities. This guy was extremely fast and could cause instant death to any target he came into contact with. It wasn't difficult to deal with him. All Darkseid had to do was put up a defensive barrier, regardless of the nature of the barrier. On the other hand, if he wasn't prepared, he was indeed very strong. When Darkseid knew he was going to fight the anti-supervisor, he was prepared to use the Black Runner as a backup, but he didn't expect to be tricked. Due to the anti-life equation, not only the Black Runner, but even his apocalypse demons had turned against him. Only his second uncle, Wasteland Wolf, still had his own will, but he was having a hard time holding on. The situation was very unfavorable. Not only the anti-supervisor's army, but even his own apocalypse demons had turned their weapons against him. Should they retreat or continue fighting? According to their previous habits, they could retreat now, leaving behind the Wasteland Wolf to cover their retreat. As for whether or not he could survive, that was not within their consideration. However, there was a subtle change today. Darkseid's greed for the anti-life equation had overshadowed everything else, especially when he saw the anti-life supervisor put on a show for him. He was desperate to get his hands on the anti-life equation at all costs. Thea could use the divine power of death to cover the entire world's laws, and Darkseid could do the same. Suddenly, a monstrous evil suppressed all laws, and a violent aura floated in every corner of the universe. Anxiety appeared in the hearts of all intelligent life. Every life felt a tremor from the depths of their soul, as if they were sitting on top of a volcano that was about to erupt. Stimulated by the great evil, the Great Plains Wolf finally broke free from the influence of the life-reversing equation. When he saw the apocalyptic demons flying towards him, he subconsciously wanted to run. However, he immediately remembered that his nephew was still not far away, so he turned his head to take a look. Not good. Boss had no intention of retreating at all. This was very unlike the Revelation Star. However, he didn't have the guts to run. All he could do was help Darkseid clean up the small fries. Black Runner. Only then did he realize that the god of death, who was on the same side as him, had become his enemy. Stop him. Buy me some time. Darkseid, who was usually a man of few words, was really anxious now. He had to say a few more words. At the same time, he didn't stop attacking the anti-life supervisor with his giant fists that could shatter planets. The anti-life supervisor's armor, which had been forged in the depths of the antimatter world, was completely shattered, but he didn't care. It was good that Darkseid didn't run away. He didn't put all his hopes on the Black Runner, and he was also fighting back with all his might. The Great Plains Wolf's heart was about to jump out of his chest as the two multiverse-level beings fought with their lives on the line. There were simply too many enemies. There were so many of them that he couldn't see the end of them. He had to rely on himself to stop so many enemies, including the elusive Black Runner. Idiot. Useless. Thea, who was watching from the outside, and Darkseid, who was in the middle of the battlefield, cursed at the same time. The Black Runner used the shadows of the Apocalypse Demon and the Anti-Life Supervisor's army to bypass the Great Plains Wolf. He was as fast as lightning. The Great Plains Wolf could use his hatred to fill the space around him and slow him down, but the Black Runner ignored him completely. He increased his speed to the maximum and charged straight at Darkseid. The Anti-Life Supervisor sneered. As the former god of knowledge, he knew how the Black Runner attacked. He grabbed Darkseid tightly with both hands, not letting him break free. In the blink of an eye, Darkseid only managed to turn his body slightly before he was hit by the Black Runner. The thin figure crashed into the giant. It was like a speeding car crashing into a mountain, but this time, the car was unscathed, and the mountain was about to collapse. Darkseid wasn't the apocalypse. He didn't have a god to rely on. Even death attacks could still hurt him and even take his life. The Black Runner's sleigh left a huge wound under his ribs. The black aura of death began to invade his body. Darkseid tried his best to suppress the injury, but it didn't work. His face was pale as if his life was about to come to an end. The anti-life supervisor laughed loudly. His voice was so hoarse that it sounded like he was sawing wood, but he was very happy. He could almost see himself becoming a human again. Freedom had never been so close to him. He didn't care if killing Darkseid would cause a commotion in the multiverse. Darkseid, you idiot, had played such a good hand. Thea cursed. She wanted to return to Earth 3, but unfortunately, Darkseid had gone berserk, and the evil world had regained its original form with his help. It was even stronger than before. The worlds will remembered the experience of being suppressed by her and was now resisting her entry. The anti-life supervisor glanced at the outside world as if he wanted to see the expressions of the onlookers. But to prevent any accidents, he looked at Darkseid again. The evil lord's deity position was very suitable for him. He was separated from his position as the anti-life supervisor and the anti-life equation. Of course, he wasn't going to be immortal again. Darkseid's deity position was tailor-made for him, and he wasn't going to give it up. Chapter 988. The counter-supervisor lowered his head and was about to absorb Darkseid's essences. He was no stranger to capturing essences to create the Mobius chair. In fact, he was very familiar with it. After identifying the 5 essences in Darkseid's body, he thought about the order of absorption. Suddenly, he saw a dagger sticking out of Darkseid's rib. The dagger was golden, and time seemed to be flowing within it. Whose dagger was that? He, Darkseid, the wild wolf, and the Black Runner did not have a dagger around them, so who could have stabbed Darkseid? He instantly realized the problem. Darkseid had stabbed himself. He was delaying the death from the wound. The counter-supervisor realized it too late. Just half a beat. Darkseid's weakness was gone. He jumped up and punched the counter-supervisor in the chest. He then stabbed his left hand into the counter-supervisor's chest and tore the counter-supervisor in half. Thea, who was watching from the outside, felt her teeth ache. She recognized the dagger. It was a divine weapon that the Egyptian gods had created to take revenge on Darkseid. She had given it to Batman after that. According to Batman, he had stabbed Darkseid with the dagger. Logically speaking, the dagger should have been used up. She did not expect him to keep it until now and even recover some of its functions. On one hand, he was suppressing his injuries. On the other hand, he was setting up a trap to lure the counter-supervisor into it. Although Darkseid was expressionless, she did not expect him to be so good at acting. The counter-supervisor was still breathing, but he had lost the ability to move. After the Black Death Emperor, he was once again on the brink of death. However, there was no White Lantern to save him this time. The counter-supervisor had lost control of his body. The anti-life equation automatically stopped spinning. Without the Black Runner and the Apocalypse demons, they regained their senses. Realizing that he had gotten himself into big trouble, the Black Runner turned around and ran. He was so fast that the onlookers could only see a blur before he completely disappeared. Thea was a little disappointed. She had wanted to recruit him. She did not expect him to run so fast. The Black Runner had the ability to run, but the Apocalypse demon soldiers could not. The Apocalypse demons looked at their boss nervously. If Darkseid had been as hot-tempered as he was in the past, he would have killed all of them in the most bloody and cruel way possible. But now that he knew what had happened to him, he no longer had the strength to do anything. The injuries caused by the Black Runner were not complicated. Whether in terms of quality or quantity, they were far inferior to Thea's. It would not be too troublesome to remove them in time. After all, he had hung up the Black Runner to study for tens of thousands of years. However, in order to induce the anti-eunuch, Darkseid used a more intense method to suppress his injuries. Right now, the power of time of the Egyptian gods had combined with the death of Osiris and the Black Runner. The combination of the injuries of a new god and an old one was more than enough for him to deal with. In addition, the life-reversing equation wasn't a piece of paper or some divine equipment. If he didn't take the initiative to separate it, it wouldn't drop even if he died 10 times. It had to be extracted from the depths of his soul. The anti-eunuch was of a higher level than a new god, so it would take some time to extract it. Even villains had enemies. Not only were the good guys targeting him, but other villains were also targeting him. The evil lord had obtained such a superweapon in front of everyone. It was the ultimate power of the universe, so it was only natural that people would be jealous of him. At the very least, the demons of hell had their eyes on him. The significance of this was self-evident. Time was tight, and the mission was important. Darkseid carried the Anti-Unica's body that had been torn in two and ordered the Wasteland Wolves to retreat. The battle had come to an end, and Thea looked away. She didn't care about the life-reversing equation at all. Let the villains fight for it. Even if the Heavenly Father wanted to join the battle, she would not stop him. Unfortunately, the Heavenly Father had been watching from the sidelines and did not have the courage to fight. The people of the Righteous Alliance returned to Earth, and the government took over. They held a meeting to discuss the captives. Super Overlord was easy to deal with. Without kryptonite to replenish his energy, he was no different from an ordinary person under the yellow sun. The cowardly Hal Jordan was also no threat. However, the matter of the Super Queen left the heroes scratching their heads. This pregnant supervillain left them at a loss. How should they deal with her? Where was the best place to lock her up? According to my observations, the child in her belly is also an Esper, and it should be Lex's child. Thea thought about it and decided to tell the truth. The people of the Righteous Alliance booed. This Super Queen was really something. She was Super Overlord's official girlfriend, but she had a secret rendezvous with Night Owl, and she had Lex's child in her belly. Everyone expressed their disdain for this kind of nonsense. While everyone was concerned about the gossip, only Batman realized the key problem. This child has an Esper ability. Yes, it's Lex's ability to absorb Esper abilities for his own use. Moreover, this child's Esper ability is innate. At the genetic level, it has already reached the stage of harmony. It's different from Lex's artificial creation. Seeing Batman's interest, they tried to dissuade him. In the end, all the captives were sent to the Heavenly Eye Society. As for the Super Queen and her child, they were considered the highest level of defense. Although the child was a blank piece of paper at birth, the Righteous Alliance hoped to introduce the concept of justice into the child's growth stage. However, no one could guarantee that the child would have the evil aura of that world. Even Thea could not guarantee it. It was always right to lock him up first. Everyone returned home. Diana, Green Arrow, and Mr. Excellent went to deal with the Silver Swan. Thea felt that she had nothing to do, so she went to the underworld. "Go, we will never meet again," she said to Black Thea's soul. The other party waved at her and followed the staff to be reincarnated. She would start a new life, but by then, she would have nothing to do with the name Thea Quinn. Johnny Quick's soul was pulled into the Seraphic Speed Force space. This guy's Esper ability was mediocre, and Miss Thea was too lazy to stop him. Lex went directly to the underworld. No one knew how many contracts he had signed before he died. He was pulled away by the underworld without even going through the procedures. She did not stop for too long in the underworld. She mobilized a large army and rushed to the antimaterial universe. She took advantage of the fact that someone was lying dead to raid their home. She was such a magnanimous person. Darkseid was setting up a powerful energy-absorbing device to absorb the anti-life equation on the Apocalypse Star. At first, he was shocked when he saw her mobilizing an army, but he was relieved when he found out that she had gone to the antimaterial universe. As for the anti-surveillance unit, he was once again beaten to a state of 1 drop of HP. There was no way he could object now. A sonic tunnel opened, and the army from the underworld descended into the antimaterial universe. "Take everything of value except for a needle and a piece of thread." The goddess of death waved her hand, and her subordinates began to loot. Chapter 989. The anti-supervisor had left some troops behind to defend the base. Unfortunately, under the assault of hundreds of liches, tens of thousands of death knights, and countless undead warriors, they did not last even 1 round. The assassin Guandong, the Siren, and the newly joined Deathstorm were all sent out. Deathstorm had a fanatical fascination with death. Thea did not even need to recruit him. She only needed to mention her name, and he would bow his head. It was easy. Thea did not go personally like when she robbed Hade's treasury. Instead, she stood in the middle and ordered her subordinates to loot everywhere. Her position as the god of wealth also blessed these liches and death knights. Each of them had a good sense of appreciation. No matter what it was used for, as long as it was valuable, they would take it away. Not long after, Guangdong had a harvest. He dragged a burnt man to Thea. "Your Majesty, we found an old acquaintance." Thea looked down. Who was this? His hair was messy and his face was as black as the bottom of a pot. This guy was burnt. She took a closer look and noticed. This is Mitron, right? I didn't recognize him without the chair. He was an acquaintance. When Thea first ascended, it was Mitron who pulled her to the father's side. Later on, when the weave was built, they had some friendship. He looked like he was burnt, but his injuries were not serious. She did not dare to use the white light ring in the antimatter universe. A few healing spells were thrown out, and Mitron slowly woke up. When he saw Thea, he sighed. He did not know what he was feeling. "Thank you, Your Majesty, for your treatment." He quickly calmed down and bowed solemnly. Thea did not put on airs. "Old friend, why are you in the antimatter universe? Is this an order from the father?" Mitron explained everything without hiding anything. In the end, he asked in confusion, "Your Majesty, why did you facilitate this battle? Don't you know how big of an impact this will have on the reality of the multiverse?" Thea was silent for a moment. "God of knowledge, do you really want to know the reason?" Mitron said, "Even if you kill me afterward, I'll listen. From the perspective of the new gods and mortals, this battle is unnecessary. However, if you were to view it from a grander perspective beyond the multiverse, you would realize that this is a necessary process for the universe to ascend to a higher level. You should know about the dark multiverse. If the present universe is not improved to a higher level before the two converge, the destruction to the present universe would be incalculable once the fusion begins." Thea's main point was to start trouble as soon as possible and not drag it out. After sending the dizzy Mitron away with his twisted logic, the Deathstorm brought good news. The Anti-Surveillance Tower, which was over 30 meters tall, was a top-notch technological creation used by the Anti-Surveillance to monitor the multiverse. The technology contained within made Deathstorm intoxicated, and Thea also took a closer look. This tower was equivalent to a supercomputer on Earth, but it was countless times more advanced. Its algorithm had probably reached the pinnacle of technology. The most important thing was that it was easy to operate, and anyone could use it. She immediately gave the order to move it back to the underworld. The underworld also needed to be in touch with the times. The two-faced man was still using paper to deal with cases. How low was that? When the top-notch facilities were moved back, they immediately upgraded to digital offices. There were many good things in the antimatter universe. Many of them were the essence left behind after the universe exploded and burned. Although they couldn't name them, they were extremely tough. Tough, resilient, and had high magic resistance. Thea found several pieces of high-quality metal and showed them to Diana. Her shield had been broken previously, and now it was time to replace it with a new one. There were many materials, but there were also many talents. For example, the weapons master who had joined the Yellow Lantern Corps before, but later went missing. He came from the antimatter universe and was a member of the Thunder team. They were all very skilled and specialized in creating weapons for the anti-surveillance army. They were not life forms in the conventional sense and were somewhat similar to demons. They could also survive in the underworld. Now, the underworld was half threatening and half tempting these skilled craftsmen, pulling them all away. Everyone who participated in this operation was very happy to be able to plunder other people's homes. She didn't care if these liches would take a portion of the loot, as long as she kept the bulk of the loot. The group of people came and went singing under her lead. The atmosphere was harmonious and friendly. The anti-surveillance army couldn't come back anymore, so it was useless to leave these things behind. It was a good chance to help the brothers in the underworld. That was what the young lady thought. When she returned to the underworld, she went back to Earth to rest. The Valkyrie was very tired today and didn't have much energy. Plus, the Silver Swan and the others were very well hidden. After circling Star City twice and not finding any trace of them, she went straight home. The two goddesses didn't play any indescribable games. They were very tired after a day of fighting. They chatted for a while, gossiping about the story of the Super Queen between the three men, and talked about the role of the first female Green Lantern on Earth in promoting feminism. Thea responded with noises, and soon the two of them turned off the lights and went to sleep. In the middle of the night, suddenly, her spiritual power warned her that someone was approaching her at a high speed. Thea immediately cut off the connection between the room and the real world. Who was attacking her? How could they not have eyes? Diana's reaction was slightly slower than her, but she quickly sat up and looked into the distance vigilantly. The person was still far away. She felt the spiritual power characteristics of the other party and asked Thea with uncertainty, "It's the extreme speed, right? It looks like Barry." Diana was puzzled, and Thea was also puzzled. It was indeed the Flash Barry. The other party was sweating profusely from running from Central City to England. The distance was not short. Why couldn't he say it during the day? Let's change clothes and go take a look. Barry was the best person in the Righteous Alliance. Many of his principles might not be agreed with, but it was undeniable that his kindness was unmatched. As soon as they changed clothes, Barry was already in front of them. However, the other party did not stop. Instead, he continued to run faster. Thea looked at Barry carefully. Barry's state was very strange. He was running at such a high speed. How could he be chatting happily? Let's also enter the super high-speed state. Seeing that the other party was not stopping, she turned around and said to Diana. As a death reserve, they could jump out of the timeline, but Diana could not. It was extremely difficult for a new god to enter and exit the timeline. Barry, what's the matter? Seeing that the Flash was about to reach out and pull them into the super high-speed state, Thea waved her hand and refused. Every extra person entering the super high speed was a burden to him. Seeing that Barry was sweating profusely, it was better not to trouble him. Phew. Barry was very tired, but he still felt relieved when he saw that he could communicate normally. A group of people in Central City hijacked the experimental nuclear fission instrument of the Sky's Eye Society. The fission has already started. I can't stop it in time. I have tried all the methods. There's no time. Barry took off his mask. His face was full of pain. He hated himself for his hatred. The explosion had already happened. In the real world, a nuclear bomb that covered Central City would explode in just 1 second. The Flash had no other way. He could only use his super high speed to break the situation. He tried Psycha's shockwave and Caitlyn's freezing. In the end, it was useless. Instead, he used a lot of energy to bring the other two people into the super high-speed state. Chapter 990. The nuclear fission in the Central City had been completed, and a large amount of heat energy had begun to accumulate. The explosion was right in front of them. Barry, who was at his wits' end, continued to run at high speed while trying to think of a solution. Since he could not find a solution, he could only cross the ocean to England to find the two goddesses. This was his last resort. If it did not work, he could only travel through time to save everything. Don't worry, I'll solve this. Thea would definitely not leave him in the lurch. Not to mention Barry's pleas, even if no one came to her, she could not just watch the nuclear bomb explode without doing anything. The distance was a little far, and time was tight. At this moment, it was already too late to teleport over. The magic that stopped time and Barry's super-fast running did not actually stop time completely. It was just a limited extension of that 1 second in reality. Thea cast her sight to the Central City far away. The nuclear fission had been completed, and a large amount of heat energy was ready to explode. If no one stopped it, the explosion would happen in the blink of an eye. For the Central City, which was second only to Star City, Gotham, and the Metropolis, for the more than 1 million citizens, and to not let her mother bear the bad name of being the one who detonated a nuclear bomb in her own land, she really gave it her all. She maintained her high-speed movement, and at the same time, She mobilized her divine power from a long distance. A large amount of divine power was simulated by the fifth dimension, forcibly suppressing the energy of the nuclear explosion and then modifying reality. This was easy to say, but it was quite difficult to actually do. Thea had to maintain high speed to modify this energy body that was constantly increasing. The long distance, short time, and the constantly changing energy all posed a huge obstacle to her. Barry looked at her nervously. The three of them felt like a minute had passed since they were traveling at high speed. Only then did Sia change the appearance of the nuclear explosion and modify it again. My ability can only suppress it for about 10 seconds. Let's hurry over. She wiped the sweat off her forehead. Only she could do such delicate work. 10 seconds in real time? Barry was still asking. Thea did not have time to explain. She pulled him and Diana and teleported to the central city. This was a cargo center, and there were many familiar faces there. Syka, Caitlin, Barry's father-in-law, Joe West were all there. There were also several armed robbers and a large container. However, because Thea and the others' own time had been extended, the people in the outside world, including this world, did not move at all. Black Amanda had learned the modern corporate system very well, and they had done a good job in cleaning up, sorting, and marking. They were afraid that the robbers would not be able to find what they were from, so they had drawn a large Heavenly Eye Society logo on the container. Other than not writing that there was a nuclear bomb inside the container, they had done everything else that should and should not have been done. Perhaps Amanda thought that anyone who offended her heavenly eye would be punished no matter how far away they were. She was so arrogant that she didn't prepare any preventive measures. Hiding? No. Esper Protector? It didn't exist. The few bodyguards were from the Midtown police station. Back then, when Bane wanted to blow up Gotham, he needed a physicist to fiddle with it before he could detonate it. However, the thing in front of Thea was simple and crude. As long as the switch was pressed, it could blow up the entire city into powder. Transporting such a dangerous device all over the world, the Heavenly Eye Society had a responsibility that could not be denied. As for the robbers, they were even crazier. Not only did they want to blow themselves up, they wanted to bring the entire city down with them. The experimental nuclear fission instrument that was originally emitting high heat had completely disappeared. In its place was an elephant slide that looked very childlike. Seeing the nuclear bomb that almost caused him to die of anxiety in this state, Barry did not know what expression he should have. Don't mind the details. Its essence hasn't changed. Time is tight. Of course, Thea wanted to be more serious. However, the abilities of the fifth-dimensional people were just that funny. She had no choice. Let's do it. You're very tired. After rejecting Barry's help, she quickly looked for an uninhabited asteroid. After that, she opened the portal. Diana picked up the elephant slide and threw it into the portal. The moment she closed the portal, she could faintly hear an earth-shattering explosion coming from the other side. A super disaster that could be recorded in history books was averted. However, the few of them could not rest. They were going to detonate a nuclear bomb on American soil. Not only did they say that, they had already detonated it. This was too serious a problem. Batman, who did not sleep all day, had just finished his daily activities of fighting criminals. When he heard the news, he rushed over immediately. Brother Superman was also called out from his bed by them. The remaining members of the Righteous Alliance were all pulled to Central City for a meeting. The Flash had exhausted too much of his energy. Thea was also very tired from forcibly changing reality in order to suppress the nuclear bomb that had already exploded. The whole story was explained by Diana. A bunch of people were surprised. This was Central City. Just from the name, they knew the location of the city. It was located in the state of Missouri and could be said to be very central. If a nuclear bomb was detonated here, the city would be razed to the ground. The surrounding cities would be affected by the radiation and the national economy would suffer a setback. A simple explosion would affect many areas in all aspects. At that time, there would be a lot of trouble. The results of the interrogation were even more ridiculous. Before Batman could ask much, the other party was like a hero and spilled the beans. These guys were not people of Allahu Akbar. They were a public welfare organization. The organization's theme was anti-nuclear energy and advocated the protection of the Earth's environment. Crazy. This was the first reaction in the minds of most superheroes. The people of Earth have too many weapons in their hands. It's too dangerous. Is it normal for a public welfare organization to be able to get so many weapons? The Sea King, who usually did not like to express his opinions, said something rare. He had always been dissatisfied with the fact that humans had so many weapons in their hands. The Sea King pointed to a few robbers and asked the heroes, if the robbers had no weapons, how could they suppress the police and detonate the nuclear bomb? You mean to ban guns? Thea asked. The Sea King nodded, indicating that he meant it. A bunch of heroes fell into silence. Banning guns was good, of course it was good. At least for superheroes, it was a good thing. Why did superheroes seem to have superpowers now? It was because ordinary heroes were shot to death before they could accumulate much experience. Over time, superheroes had been monopolized by superpowers. Even for ordinary people like Batman, his starting point was far higher than those vigilantes. The accumulation of countless technological equipment and the harsh training of the Assassin League were all things that vigilantes did not have. They were hot-blooded and wanted to be a hero. They wanted to get rid of violence. When they walked on the streets with masks and rubber sticks, their ending was already doomed. 99% of them were killed in the streets. Chapter 991. The topic of banning guns was a cliché as it involved huge interests. The National Rifle Association was just a target on the table, and there were many other forces involved behind the scenes. Many people could be implicated under these connections. Not to mention others, Miss Thea and Bruce Wayne could be easily connected. Thea had so many weapons companies under her name, so it couldn't be fake. Where did Batman get all those high-tech equipment? He only modified them a little, but who developed the original? He was actually one of the biggest arms dealers in the country. The two weapons tycoons looked at each other and saw the helplessness in each other's eyes. Banning guns wasn't that easy. They didn't care about money. If they shut down the weapons factories today, 10 new companies would pop up tomorrow. After all, there were many people in the industry, so it was impossible to send the weapons designers and staff to the docks to carry sacks. Once they did that, the world wouldn't be far from chaos. However, the people of the Righteous Alliance were interested in this proposal. Although Superman felt that humans should be given freedom, too much freedom didn't seem appropriate. Thea gave Batman a look. He was more suitable for offending people. Batman didn't disappoint and bluntly rejected the proposal. The Sea King shrugged. Do as you please. Even if the land was blown up, it wouldn't affect my home. Banning guns was unrealistic, but weapons of mass destruction could be checked. The citizens were too smart and knowledgeable. The super hacker Kane from Star City, who had been clamoring for revenge against the Quinn family, had made a lot of powerful bombs. Green Arrow had tried to capture him several times, but she had been fooled by the bombs because she didn't want to harm the innocent. Many of the superheroes' villains had a talent for bombs, and the Joker was one of the most outstanding talents. Whether they learned it in school or self-taught, the power of bombs couldn't be ignored. The civilian research teams were too bold and dared to research anything. The nuclear explosion this time was a classic example, and the culprit was Batman and his subordinates' research laboratories. A few hot-headed researchers suddenly had an idea. They didn't know what kind of data they needed to calculate and needed the nuclear fission experiment equipment. After submitting a few reports, they prepared to borrow a piece of equipment from the Heavenly Eye Society. The cooperation between the Heaven's Eye Society and the Righteous Alliance was quite good, and with the face of the young Miss and Batman, the person in charge let them go without much deliberation, which led to today's crisis. The relationship between the army and the people sounded quite touching, but in reality, the leaders of both sides didn't know about it. Their subordinates just did it in a daze. Thea even suspected that the other party might think that Zhonglian wanted to borrow this thing. Otherwise, they wouldn't have sent a truck with 2 drivers carrying a container to transport such a dangerous device. Thea left the couplet for the others to study slowly. She hurried back to the White House. Her mother had to know about this. It turned out that she had guessed correctly. Black Amanda was urgently called to the White House in a helicopter in the middle of the night. When she found out the whole story, her dark face turned pale with fright. It wasn't her order, nor was it Steve Trevor, nor was it the order of the black man's wife, Lara. After investigating, he realized that it was a loan agreement signed by a branch base's person in charge. Don't we have an early warning system? Could anyone come into contact with some highly dangerous equipment? Where is our classified confidentiality system? Is it strictly implemented according to the rules? This time it's Central City. Will it be the White House or the Pentagon next time? Moira was furious and threw out several questions in a row. She had always been dissatisfied with the Heaven's Eye Society being out of her control. Now she not only wanted to beat them, but also wanted to add dirt. If Thea hadn't been strong enough, she would have been the first president to detonate a nuclear bomb on the mainland. Once it was detonated, the government would have resigned, and it wouldn't be inconceivable to pursue criminal responsibility. If the nuclear bomb was detonated, millions of people would die. Someone had to take the blame. She, the president, and Ryan, the defense minister, would have to go to jail together. It was 30% fake and 70% real. Moira was indeed very angry. She was sleeping, and the nuclear bomb was detonated. Was there anything more ridiculous than this? Amanda's face was full of spittle, but she was also very helpless. The intelligence organization was not monolithic, and the internal factions were entangled with each other. In order to show their control, the military bosses pulled one faction to beat the other. Amanda, Steve, were all tossed back and forth in different ways. Naturally, many neutral factions were born. This time, the person in charge of the subbase was from the neutral faction. The other party was kind enough to flatter her, but in the end, not only did he not flatter her, he almost knocked the horse out. Strictly investigate the person responsible for the incident. I want to listen to the follow-up report tomorrow. Moira waved her hand and shooed Amanda away. It's really tiring to be the president. Moira put down the pen and complained with some distress. Thea rubbed her shoulders. Although her mother said that she was unwilling, she was actually very proud. Today's incident could have turned into a disaster for any president, not even Washington and Roosevelt. Once the explosion happened, all existing political means could not solve the problem because it was too serious. Thea mentioned the ban on guns, and Moira's attitude was not optimistic. Anyone with a little intelligence could see that the major problem of social security was the proliferation of guns, but no one wanted to touch this minefield. Let's be cautious first, but your suggestion to check the sources of danger and manage dangerous materials by category can be tried. The president's mind was very sharp. She immediately realized that she could gain more power in this matter. The next day, Thea followed her to the Pentagon. The vice president and Minister Ryan already knew the topic in advance, but the remaining generals were at a loss. Why did the president come to the Pentagon? As soon as the story began, they exploded. A nuclear explosion. Some unknown public welfare and environmental protection organization had almost detonated a nuclear bomb in their homeland. This news was very terrifying. Moira could rely on the teleportation gem to automatically teleport in a life-threatening situation, but these generals did not have this benefit. They were all stunned. This is too much, this is a crime, the Heaven's Eye Society, these guys. An old general gritted his teeth. At first, he wanted to call them bastards, but after considering many factors, he finally changed it to guys. However, there were many people who were angrier than him. No one wanted to sleep at home or at a mistress' house, and then everything would be gone with a bang. It was indeed efficient and painless to die, but they did not want to die. Not at all. This time it was Central City. Where would it be next time? No one could guarantee that it would be the city where they lived. Chapter 992. There was no doubt that nuclear bombs should be banned. This was not something that could be bought and set off casually. Even the toilet cleaner in the Pentagon agreed. His job was not easy to come by, so nuclear bombs must be banned. However, If hidden dangers were to be investigated nationwide, everyone from the minister to the toilet manager knew that it would not be easy. To what extent would the investigation be carried out? Would a lot of other things be found in the name of nuclear weapons? Everyone had their own agenda and no longer had the enthusiasm to discuss. However, since the president had thrown this question out, they had to answer it. They could not just say that they were not afraid of death. In the end, General Ryan made the decision to conduct a nationwide investigation. Moira certainly would not let go of this opportunity. The military was the hardest hit area. They had the most weapons and were the most dangerous. However, corruption, dereliction of duty, espionage, and cover-up were equally prominent. The previous presidents were like a rubber stamp to the Pentagon. They would select someone from within the military, nominate the president, and approve the Congress. This matter was considered over and did not affect the military at all. This was a good opportunity. Moira directly assigned 5 of his aides to join the investigation and submitted several seemingly simple but actually not simple position amendments to the Congress. For the first time, government personnel officially entered the core leadership of the Pentagon under the pretext of national security. The Congress firmly supported Moira this time. The president had a term of office. Now these rights were in the hands of the president. When they stepped down and became the president, they could enjoy these rights themselves. There was no reason to refuse. Proposal, review, approval, and green light all the way. Faced with the pressure from the White House and Congress at the same time, the military could not resist in an instant and could only let it go. Mixing in sand was only the first step. Moira's combination of punches did not stop. Many officials in the indescribable country were criticized. In fact, it was the same on the other side of the ocean. In order to resist Superman, they could pull together dozens of people to form the so-called Superman Threat and Democratic Development Committee. Now it was even easier. Moira directly pulled a group of people to establish a supervision and review committee with the purpose of investigating hidden dangers and carrying out strict confidential management. All the materials that could be used to make highly dangerous weapons were listed and recorded one by one. Clues were tracked across the country. If the materials were still in their hands, they were checked on the spot. If they were not, who were they sold to and when were they sold? Thea also controlled the global black market to cooperate with the operation. The hidden dangers would not be known if they were not checked, but once they checked, they were shocked. Not to mention the government officials who came with different motives, even the big shots in the military were frightened by the results. It was God's blessing that they were able to survive until today. 15 nuclear bombs had been lost. Now, these nuclear bombs only existed in the registration information and on paper. As for their specific whereabouts, even Thea couldn't find out, let alone them. They had also lost a lot of other destructive bombs, and the materials that could be used to make these bombs were also lost in a frenzy. For a time, even Batman was exhausted from dealing with them. Old Lucius had to deal with all kinds of inspections for a day before he couldn't take it anymore. There were even more shady dealings within the Wayne Group, and they really couldn't withstand the inspections. All Mr. Batman could do was change into a suit and leather shoes while wearing Bruce Wayne's vest to deal with the nationwide investigation. At the same time, he sent Barbara and Nightwing to create a false impression. All sorts of highly dangerous equipment were piled up in the warehouse. They would wait for the inspectors to leave before pulling them away. Mr. Wayne, you've made it a little fake. The data of this experimental plane is not quite the same as what was recorded in the report. Thea was also a major shareholder of Wayne Group. She played football and was a referee. Today, she led the team to investigate the problem. Looking at the bat fighter that had been completely repainted with a new coat of paint, she almost laughed out loud. The equipment hasn't been used for a long time. It's aging. Batman lied through his teeth. Last night, he had flown the bat fighter around Gotham. Thea giggled and covered for him, and Wayne Group passed without any mishaps. Inspections like theirs were happening all over the country at the same time. At first, they thought it was a routine inspection that was all talk and no action. But later, someone leaked the news that a nuclear bomb had been 1 second away from exploding, and for a time, everyone was in danger. Amanda and Steve were still very patriotic. They were scolded by the higher-ups one after another, but they were still able to calmly participate in the operation. With the help of special agents, a bunch of scientists working their brains to figure things out, and the Alliance as hired thugs, the nationwide search went smoothly. Many people and laboratories had a large number of necessary materials for the assembly of lethal weapons. In the process, their personal interests would definitely be harmed. Naturally, they organized themselves and shouted, "Private rights are not infringed upon." Thea did not indulge their bad habits. She mobilized the crowd and spread rumors around the laboratories. Something about radiation, cancer, being blown up in the middle of the night, and so on. When they heard that it was so dangerous, the citizens went crazy. The people who shouted that their private rights were not infringed upon were quickly defeated by more ordinary people. As for calling the police, it was not difficult for the police to choose between arresting the 1,000 people or arresting him alone. After a busy week, Thea remembered what she had gained in the antimatter world. She showed the metals she had carefully selected to Diana. One could imagine the sturdiness of the metal that remained after the Big Bang. Diana was worried about her shield being damaged. Now was the time to get a new one. The new shield was named Courage. It was light green and seemed to contain an indescribable weight. Diana told her that when she was forging, she saw that the shield contained a warrior who resisted the anti-watchers to the end. The other party's unyielding perseverance gave the shield a stronger defense. Sia did not comment on this. She felt that the so-called warriors and resistance to the end were all hallucinations created by Diana when the two of them were exchanging pointers. However, she wisely did not point it out. If Diana said so, then so be it. The battle on Earth 3 had restored Diana's confidence. With all kinds of rare metals in the antimatter universe, she had rebuilt her equipment. Even if it was not as good as a fantasy weapon like the Holy Sword, it had reached the peak in the material world. The two goddesses had been learning from each other frequently recently. Thea had finally mastered the two emotions of courage and love. The first light ring had also been purified. They all tried it, and the results were not too surprising. Diana had a lot of positive emotions. She was like the embodiment of virtue. However, there were not only positive emotions, but also negative ones. Anger, greed, fear, and other emotions such as jealousy and hatred were not suitable for her. Diana lacked tolerance, so Thea could only use it for herself. The source of emotions was still in the ring, but the impurities had been removed and it could be worn. At this time, it was shining brightly on Thea's right hand, flashing with a dazzling brilliance. Chapter 993. She still needed to communicate with the ring, so Thea had been wearing the ring for the past few days. Death, soul, wealth, trade, literature, and the emotions in the ring. She now occupied 6 divine positions. Actually, when she was treating Mitron, she wanted to take the chair of Mobius. The divine position of knowledge was not a bad idea, but Mitron was alert. At least he knew her, so she hesitated and did not kill him. She did not know if it was possible to accommodate more deity thrones, but both the Heavenly Father and Darkseid had 5 deity thrones. She also felt that with the addition of deity thrones, there was a slight imbalance in the divine power. The Heavenly Father had set a good example for her, and she made the same choice. The divine position of literature was given up, but it was best to keep the goodies within the family, so it was a good opportunity to give it to Diana. Whether it was the Valkyrie's own attainments in Greek aesthetics or her ability to command the bards on the new planet of creation, Diana was the most suitable candidate. Of course, the most important reason was that she was one of them. After receiving the divine position of literature, Diana added a touch of gentleness to her valiance, increasing her charm by a lot. She was now more delicate than before. Diana had a strong personality, so the divine position of literature had little effect on her. It was fortunate that she did not become a literary youth. On Sia's side, there was a little bit of trouble. She gave up literature and art and gained emotions, which increased her strength by 20%. Emotions were different from death. They were too active. If left alone, they would be like a wild horse, changing every moment. Perhaps 1 second they would be excited, and the next second they would be depressed. Anger could greatly increase one's strength, fear could increase one's speed, and pity could reduce one's opponent's hostility. Any one of these was actually quite good. For example, Diana specialized in courage. She had the ability to challenge those above her level and ignore her own limits. But if all the emotions were mixed together, it would not be so comfortable. It was too messy. Perhaps a large group of people with thousands of personalities would be more suitable for this ring. Thea really felt uncomfortable. She had to rely on death to suppress her emotions every day, or she would immediately become crazy. This origin was not suitable for her, nor was it suitable for intelligent life. It seemed like the Guardian and First Lamp had made a wise choice to wear it as a ring. The source of emotions was too chaotic. Without the support of a great divine power, one could turn crazy at any moment. In the end, Thea did not directly absorb it. She hung it on her ring and used it. If she did not use it, she could just seal it away. There were many emotional weaknesses, but there were also many additional abilities. Focusing on one emotion for a short period of time could increase one's combat strength by 30% or more. With proficiency in switching emotions, you can selectively increase your attributes in battle. When the enemy gets used to your strength and speed, you can suddenly burst forth and decide the outcome of the battle with a single blow. The battle between Darkseid and the Anti-Monitor was a good example. When the difference in strength between the two sides was not too great, the slightest change could affect the outcome of the battle. Now that she had obtained the emotion divinity position and had eliminated all of her counterparts in the multiverse, she was now the only one. The name Thea Quinn now belonged to her, and she didn't know if there would be any benefits in the future. However, her ranking in the Endless family had risen by 3 places, and she was now ranked 17th. This made her look forward to the equation of life even more. She even increased the training for Kyle Rayner's emotional fusion. Unfortunately, the further he progressed, the more difficult it became. Even the super cheater Kyle Rayner found it difficult. His understanding of greed was still not up to par. Now, he had only fused 5 emotions. It had been a week since he had made any progress. She had not made any progress with the equation of life. She could not even see the 8 characters. Darkseid was in a similar situation. The treasure was right in front of him, but he could not take it out. Guandong, his old subordinate, had sneaked back to investigate. The great warlock, Desard, had set up a huge formation to extract the equation of life. Large numbers of slaves and civilians were slaughtered, and the entire planet was filled with cries of agony. From the outside, the entire planet was covered in a bloody light. Darkseid seemed to have gone mad. He sent his subordinates out every day to capture people and throw them into the formation to be killed. He tried to use the power of blood to draw out the equation of life. Unfortunately, the Anti-Monitor's level was too high. Darkseid was unwilling to part with the equation of life, so such a stupid method had little effect. Logically speaking, if he persevered and continued to draw hard day after day, year after year, he would definitely be able to extract the anti-life equation. However, what Darkseid lacked now was time. In less than half a month, Darkseid had already defeated 2 waves of Hell's attacks. The invading demons were not too strong, but they were not weak either. They were all Lord-tier demons. Without Darkseid's help, the Great Plains wolves and the others were having a hard time holding on. This was obviously Hell's way of testing Darkseid's strength. After Thea and Batman raided Darkseid, the demons of Hell could no longer suppress their desire for the equation of life. They accepted the mission and started raiding Darkseid 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, and so on. An endless stream of demons swarmed Darkseid, but he did not have the time to be angry. He would not give up on the equation of life. He was the evil tyrant, and he was not afraid of anyone. He would fight to his heart's content. By the time Guandong left Darkseid, they had already defeated the demon army's 3rd attack. Darkseid personally defeated a Lord-tier demon and used his Omega Ray to kill it until only its head was left. As long as the demon was not dead, the will of Hell would not revive it. Darkseid hung the Lord Tier demon's head on the main door of his palace to show off his strength and boost the morale of his subordinates. It did not have much of a deterrent effect. The demons continued to charge forward like a tidal wave, and Darkseid's subordinates regained some confidence. Heaven and the new creator planet were celebrating, and it was as lively as the new year. The righteous faction was more optimistic about the battle between Darkseid and Hell. Keep fighting. Don't stop. The spies planted by the new creator planet on the Apocalypse planet, the fallen angels whose hearts were in Hell but whose hearts were in Heaven, had all received instructions from the higher-ups to think of ways to expand the war forever. It turned out that the archangels were not kind people either. The archangels saw that Darkseid was at a loss for what to do with the equation of life and were afraid that he would not be able to persevere. To help him strengthen his conviction, the archangels decided to create some hope for the evil tyrant. They worked together to awaken their boss, the Lord of Heaven, Michael, who was currently immersed in his own world. This son of God, who was as famous as Lucifer, used his high standards to come up with an idea for them before going back to sleep. This method of efficiently absorbing the equation of life had accidentally fallen into Darkseid's hands after 7 or 8 turns. Chapter 994. As one of the most powerful beings in the multiverse, Thea did not fall behind. She could not do anything about the anti-life equation, but she knew the power of death all too well. The Black Runner had Osiris's divine power mixed with time, so it was not a problem for her. She was the absolute authority in the realm of death, and Guandong had left a way to eliminate the power of death in Darkseid's bedroom. When Darkseid was in trouble, everyone came to his aid. Everyone in the realm of the gods offered their help to Darkseid, whose father was stuck on the wall and did not have a strong backer. Those who had money gave money, and those who had strength gave strength. The scale of the war began to increase, and the Apocalypse Star attracted the attention of many powerful beings. Even some world lords from the outer realms began to come to the Apocalypse Star. Thea watched as Darkseid, who had recovered more than half of his power, defeated the King of Tears. The King of Tears was like a cloud of mist. He had a special rule that anyone who saw his face would die. However, he was defeated by Darkseid in the end and fled back to his own world. The King of Tears was definitely not weak. As the overlord of a small world in the outer realms, his body was a cloud of mist that was similar to resentment. He increased his power by absorbing negative emotions and the souls of living beings. After millions of years, his power had increased to a terrifying level. For Thea, Darkseid, and the other new gods, the path ahead was unclear. They did not know whether they would be like Yojia Khan, who had accumulated top-tier divine positions, or find a new path to take. They did not have a path to take, but they did not have much pressure on their own survival. As long as they did not jump out and seek death, they would have no problem surviving until the day the entire world was destroyed. In terms of the level of the multiverse, the new gods were the ones who weren't at the top but were at the bottom. The King of Tears could not do that. His power had accumulated, and there was no good way to evolve. In the end, he would lose his mobility and become a pig waiting to be slaughtered. Or he would hide in his own small world until it exploded. The anti-life equation was an ultimate universal power that attracted him greatly. Even though he knew it was dangerous, he still left his own world and came to snatch it. Unfortunately, Darkseid had recovered more than half of his strength with the help of the enthusiastic crowd. He did not care which corner of the world the King of Tears had jumped out from. He just pinned him to the ground and gave him a good beating. The Apocalypse Star was in a heated battle. Many planets enslaved by the evil tyrant had sent troops to participate in the battle. Even so, they were barely able to resist the attacks of Hell. The great demons all felt that they would be able to break through the Apocalypse Star with just a little more effort. Then, they would obtain the life-reversing equation and become the Lord of Hell, reaching the peak of the demon race. After fighting for half a month, Thea found that the demons were a little tired, so she began to help Hell. The demons' battles were too brainless. It was just a noisy wave of attacks. They lacked a talent to coordinate logistics. Thea sent out Macanthus to help organize the reinforcements. After all, Hell was very vast, and some demons did not know about the good news of the war with the Apocalypse Star. The succubus queen used scientific methods to organize the troops while drawing in reinforcements to replenish the battlefield's consumption. It's so boring. Watching them fight every day for a long time was tiring. At this moment, the young mistress stretched and yawned as she complained. It was as if God had heard her call. The next moment, there was a knock on the door. Diana looked at her pitifully lying on the bed and could only open the door herself. After a while, she walked back. "Barbara is here. Get up." She had known Batgirl for 10 years and had long been good friends. Now, she did not treat her as an outsider. She put on a coat and walked out of the bedroom. Barbara had been entrusted by her to secretly investigate a matter. Today, there was finally an answer. In front of outsiders, Thea's appearance was not bad. She was wise, steady, and filled with the elegant charm of a woman. Diana was even more mature and strong. The two goddesses looked at each other from time to time. Even a blind person could see the affection in their eyes. Even though Barbara was also a woman, she felt a little dizzy. Fortunately, her sexual orientation was relatively firm and she would occasionally have a friendly chat with Nightwing. She had not been turned gay by this incredible world. She secretly cursed the two goddesses who were showing off their affection. She deliberately coughed and took out a thick stack of information. There were handwritten, printed, and various photos and copies. "This is all I could find in Gotham. Take a look and see if it's of any help." Thea looked down and flipped through it. Diana also picked it up and looked at it carefully. "Myths. You're still concerned about this?" Diana flipped through it casually. Most of them were legends and stories. Between the lines, there were hopes that humans had for the gods, for a good harvest, and for the tribe to prosper. Diana was a little confused by her lover's actions. They were already gods. Was there a need to look at the records of these primitive humans about the gods? But she knew that Thea must have her own motives. There's a hidden truth about the origin of the current human race. As she spoke, Thea pointed at a rubbing. After the Atlanteans, in the era before the modern humans, there were 3 tribes living in this world. They were the Eagle tribe, the Wolf tribe, and the Bear tribe. But history has changed. Now there are 4 tribes, and there's an additional Bat tribe, she said in a low voice. Diana naturally understood such an obvious hint. "You mean Bruce?" "That's right." This time, it was Barbara who answered. As the librarian of Gotham's library, her daily job was to go out at night to fight monsters and sleep in the library during the day. After receiving Thea's request, she spent a lot of time in Gotham's library, which could be said to be the place with the most abundant information in the whole of America, to search for the truth. "My investigation shows that there were originally 3 tribes. But it seems that a lot of evidence has appeared overnight, showing that there were 4 tribes. My memory is not very clear." Barbara scratched her head. Obviously, this part of her memory had been covered. The reason why she felt that something was wrong was because not much time had passed, and a small part of her old memory still remained. Diana thought about it and did not feel that there was much of a problem. Batman's timeline was messed up by the Omega Ray, and after that, it caused some cosmic tremors. Wasn't this matter already over? That was a very far-reaching matter. Bruce built a tribe in the ancient era, and after he left that point in time, something that should not have happened. Thea finished speaking and took out a picture. It was an ancient mural. In the picture, a golden light cut through the sky and landed on the ground. The incident with Bruce was a coincidence, but in our time, it became inevitable. The history that should have happened took a turn here, and the trajectory of human evolution deviated slightly. Chapter 995. Diana picked up the photo and looked at it twice. As the new god of art and art, she felt that the mural was quite well drawn. A few simple lines were enough to roughly restore a passing image. A spaceship visited Earth in ancient times. It captured 2 unlucky people, but when it passed through the atmosphere, some of the spaceship's fragments fell to Earth. These metals gave the ancient tribes great power. They disappeared from our history and went to new worlds. After they left, the remaining tribes reproduced and gave birth to our current generation of Earthlings. The Mu continent civilization, followed by the Gendeans with their special abilities, and the Lemurians with their mind control. There's no problem with these three prehistoric civilizations connecting. However, there's a gap between the brave Atlanteans of the fourth civilization and our current generation of Earthlings. The gap is because of this spaceship, she said as she pointed at the photo. Thea sighed. The reality that Batman had changed was only real from her perspective. If the Eagle and Bear tribes hadn't left, history would have changed beyond recognition. You want me to investigate a bat tribe that's a mixture of reality and illusion. Will it have any effect on reality? Barbara asked. As a Batgirl, she preferred enemies that she could see and touch. She had a headache when it came to illusions and reality. I think the Bat tribe is about to return. They represent a dark force that's still accumulating power. Once they're ready, it'll be a disaster for Earth and the universe. It won't take long because they have a beacon in this world. Their eyes have always been here. Barbara furrowed her brows as she thought about this. After half a minute, she said, but Bruce just returned, that's how time works. For us, Bruce has just returned, but if we analyze the timeline, this Bat tribe has been a thing of the past, Diana explained. That's right. Actually, it's not just the Bat tribe that's about to return. I think the Eagle tribe is coming back too. We have the beacon of the Eagle tribe here too. Thea held up a photo. The man and woman in the photo were Prince Khufu and Priestess Chayala. What are you going to do? Diana asked. Thea already had a plan in mind. The world that represents Bat is in chaos. I haven't found the right way. But we can investigate the Eagle world first and see if they are a threat to Earth. In her impression, the Ying world, no, the Eagle world. There were really only 2 or 3 big eagles and small eagles. There were no powerful people. She wanted to observe the composition of that world. In her own world, the stone man had already died, and life had begun all kinds of evolution. It could barely be considered a small world. How would it develop after that? If possible, he would absorb the world's origin into his own world. Barbara understood this time. He was trying to gain the initiative by striking first. Batgirl feels that this method is better than rummaging through old papers in the library, and she supports it. Thea thought about it and decided that the task was not too dangerous. He might as well pull all the female couplets together. It could be considered a group activity. 3 days later, a group of female heroes gathered in Central City. The reason why they gathered here was because Thea couldn't find the Eagle world. There were many small worlds like this. Some were born naturally, and some were created by strong people. Without the coordinates, she couldn't enter. They came to Central City because there was a bug-level teleportation expert here, Shockwave Cisco Ramon. Simple teleportation wasn't difficult. Thea and Raven could do it. Diana could do it with a little effort. But to sense the destination, Cisco's ability was needed. Shockwave's ability to search and open doors was very powerful. It was just that this guy was limited by his physical fitness and hadn't developed it. Since the cutting-edge technology laboratory was blown up by Scarface, this small apartment was now the Lightning Squad's on-site command center. Cisco and Caitlin's boss had run away. Naturally, no one paid them. Ayers was still giving birth in the 30th century. Even if she came back, it would be useless. She had already quit her job. Wally West was unemployed and didn't have much money. As for Bart Allen, he was a proper child labor. No one dared to hire him. Such a large group of people had to rely on Barry's meager salary at the Central City police station to survive. It seemed quite miserable. Considering that there were still some battles in the Eagle world, Felicity, who had no combat power, was left on Earth. Batwoman, who had announced her retirement, and the Sea King's friends, Yavala and Cassina, who were living in seclusion, weren't there. The remaining female heroes were all here. Thea, Diana, Supergirl, Batwoman, Catwoman, Green Arrow, Starchaser, Wonder Girl, Black Canary, Zatanna, Blazing Ice, who was about to be turned gay in the International Union, Frost Killer Caitlin, Sea King's wife Mia, Superman's wife Louise, Cassandra, Raven, and the new female Green Lantern, Jessica. There were a total of 18 female heroes. There was also Pandora, who had been very close to them and had even experienced many ancient legends. There were also the landmark characters of this operation, Hawkman and Hawkgirl, Kendra Sanders, who were now called Carter Hall. I'm going to take a stroll on the streets. There seems to be a fire on East Street. This group of people, especially a group of women, made Flash run away immediately. Psycho wanted to leave too. Including Pandora and Hawkgirl, a total of 20 fully armed women were looking at him with swords and shields. What was going on? After so many years of experience, he, who now had a somewhat stable temperament, was instantly stunned. Swoosh. Hawkgirl took out her hammer. This hammer was 2 times smaller than when she was in the Purple Lantern Corps. In the past, it was like smashing a watermelon. Now, it could only smash a nail. Psycho was so shocked that he almost jumped up. What was this woman trying to do? Caitlin, Thea, and the others held back their laughter and told him what happened. Ancient civilization. The high-class term instantly attracted Psycho's interest. He really wanted to go and take a look. But there were 20 women and he was a man. It seemed a little strange. Let's go together. There should be many ancient ruins there. Hawkman persuaded him very sincerely. Psycho only then noticed that there was another man with an off-the-charts IQ. He quickly understood what Hawkman was trying to say. This guy also felt that there were too many women and wanted to bring him along as a companion. After thinking for a while, his curiosity about the prehistoric civilization finally overcame his awkwardness. It should be fine if he was thick-skinned. He comforted himself. Thea quickly told him about the mission. Using this metal to find a different dimension. After getting a definite answer, he closed his eyes and began to search. Chapter 996. Psycho looked up and asked Thea with uncertainty, I think there's a piece in Gotham. Needless to say, Milady could guess that Batman must have used some technological method to retrieve a large piece of metal from Hawkgirl's hammer. She had kept Hawkman's original hammer for herself and left it in the underworld for the Deathstorm to study. Thea had originally given the couple a hammer, but it seemed like Batman had taken a lot of it. Hawkman and Hawkgirl could not have used just one hammer. They must have smelted it again and split it into 2 to create this small hammer. It really was a hammer. Thea felt that Psycho had probably seen Batman in the shockwave. She waved her hand to tell him not to worry about these small details and to continue the search. Leaving Earth, the search area increased, and his stamina consumption increased. He had to stop and rest from time to time. Thea spun her emotion ring and gave Psycho a lot of emotion of hope. Diana also used some of her god power of perseverance. With the help of their abilities, the search sped up. No. I can sense them, but there seems to be something between them. Psycho said with a frown. There's a barrier. Do they need some blood as a guide? Or do they need something like a password to open the door? Thea tried a few possibilities and flipped through the information in an attempt to find this password. She even took some blood from Hawkgirl's wrist. Unfortunately, it did not work. The big lowly raven suddenly interrupted. Could it be that they need to open the portal at a special location? Hey! Hee. Thea felt that what she said made sense. She seemed to be overthinking things. Raven puffed out her tiny chest, looking proud of herself. After thinking about it, Thea felt that it was most likely the case. How high could the ancient tribesmen be in magic? It was most likely a small world created by a few shaman priests from a few tribes working together with some ancient gods. There was a fundamental difference between creating a world and creating one. Creation must be made out of nothing, and the impossible must be made possible. Creating a new world was much simpler. It was similar to the new continent that she had created back then. Starting from the real world, borrowing part of the rules of the real world, and relying on the material world, their entrances and exits would definitely be in a special place. He quickly flipped through the information and found the last place where the 3 tribes disappeared. Peru. He led everyone to a rainforest. The signal is very strong. I think I found it. There's a lot of metal there. After half an hour, Psycho finally had some good news. Thea asked him to open the portal and sent his spiritual power into it to investigate. After 2 minutes, She shook her head. That world is already barren. I'm afraid there are no signs of life. The first search ended in failure. After a short break, the second search began. The second time, the target was still not the Eagle world. It seemed to be attacked by the turbulent flow of energy, and it was impossible for any life to survive. When the portal opened for the third time, she tested it and finally smiled. There's life there. Everyone, get ready. Let's go. After finding their target, everyone packed up their equipment. Diana took the lead and Thea brought up the rear. Everyone walked into the portal one by one. This was a world with dense vegetation. Towering trees could be seen everywhere. Scattered light shone through the shade of the trees and scattered messily on the ground. The few of them looked into the distance and found that there were rare life forms moving around in the treetops. They had wings on their backs and could fly freely. Wings were not the only reason they could fly. Another reason was that the gravity here was lighter than on Earth. 2/3 of Earth's gravity here. Saika was just about to express his feelings when Barbara, who was on the other side, checked the various data through her wristwatch. Barbara was using the Bat family's equipment to check this world. Saika pursed his lips. If he had known, he would have brought some equipment over as well. However, his equipment was not as small and portable as the Bat family's. The space here is not big. It's about the same as Iceland in the real world. Most of the life forms are there. Thea also looked at the entire world and quickly found their target. Following her finger, the heroines saw a huge floating island in the sky above the treetops and between the clouds. Why did they abandon Earth and come here? Supergirl was puzzled. Even a fool could tell that the environment here was not good. The place was small and there were few resources. They gave up the chance to become the overlord of Earth and came here to suffer. Were the ancient Eagle tribe a bunch of idiots? No one could answer this question. Who knew what the tribe leader was thinking back then? Someone's coming. Supergirl, who had been staying on Earth and was looking around happily in a new environment, noticed something unusual. She whispered to the heroines. She did not think that the two newcomers would be much of a threat to the heroines. The truth was more or less the same. Two men with wings on their backs appeared in front of the heroines. Their clothes were very simple and crude. They were muscular and had unknown patterns drawn on their faces. One of them held a spear while the other held a stone axe. The heroines automatically looked at the Eagle hero and Eagle girl. Their appearance was similar to yours. You've arrived at your home. Look, your fellow countrymen are here to pick you up. The two men chatted for a while. They also saw the Eagle hero and Eagle girl. Their clothes and weapons were better than theirs. No matter how small the hammer was, it was still a metal hammer, unlike them who were still holding stone weapons. The two birdmen looked at each other and turned around to fly up to the floating island. Thea did not stop them. It was an entertainment activity. If the other party came out in full force, she would just kill them all. Unfortunately, the Eagle tribe's birdmen did not come. Instead, a group of uninvited guests came. Roar! The roars of wild beasts spread through the forest. Countless figures appeared in the dense forest. Their eyes were glowing green as they sized up the group of uninvited guests. I feel like they don't have any good intentions. Saika's combat experience could be counted on one hand. He wanted to show off his manliness in front of the beauties, but he was also a little nervous. Saika was vexed. If only his good brother, the Flash, had followed him. He could have waved his hand and said, "Barry, go." After that, all the enemies would be defeated. He would not be in such a predicament now. There were only two men here, him and the Eagle man. Even if he was not good at fighting, he had to stand in front. Don't be afraid, Saika. I'll protect you. A scene that made Saika want to cry happened. He did not get the chance to show off his manliness. Pandora, who was wearing a long purple windbreaker and holding two guns, stood in front of him. She aimed the anti-magic bullets at the enemies in the dense forest and was ready to fire. Saika really wanted to shout, "Sister, you can protect me, but can you not call my name?" Chapter 997. Ignoring Saika's gloominess, The female hero's gazes only lingered on him for a moment before moving away. This was because the dark figures had walked out of the forest one after another. Their appearance shocked the female heroes. They walked upright with human bodies, but their hands and feet had turned into claws that were characteristic of wild beasts. Their heads, which were supposed to represent intelligent life, were replaced by wolf heads. Their eyes were bloodthirsty and ruthless. They had become a pack of wild beasts dominated by desire. This is probably the wolf tribe, right? Their world has been reduced to ruins, and they could only seek refuge with the eagle tribe. Unfortunately, time has turned them into wild beasts. The heroes' analytical skills were not bad. They could come to such a simple conclusion, especially since the goal of this mission was to find these tribes. Most likely. However, their physique is much stronger than humans. Their hunting instincts also make them more ferocious. Everyone, be careful. Thea was afraid that the heroines would underestimate the enemy, so she reminded them. A sharp howl sounded from the depths of the forest. The wolf tribe seemed to have received some kind of order. They all got down on all fours and pounced on the heroines. Bang! Bang! Whoosh! Pandora's pistol and Shadow's arrows were fired at the same time. The rest of the heroines also attacked. Sia saw that everyone's blood was boiling as they went up to fight. Obviously, they all enjoyed fighting. It was a bit boring for her to throw out a super AoE instant death spell. After thinking for a while, she also took out her bow and arrow and pretended to shoot. Diana rolled her eyes at her. She suppressed her strength and charged forward with sword and shield in hand. The two of them had the self-awareness, but the rest of the heroines did not. Raven, Cassandra, and Supergirl were still young. They were at the age where they liked to show off. They charged into the enemy's formation happily. Dark flame blasted away more than 10 werewolves. Supergirl grabbed one of the unlucky werewolves in her hand and curled it up like she was bowling. She then threw it out with a bang, smashing another group of werewolves along the way. Cassandra searched among the enemies and soon found a tall werewolf who was a head taller and more muscular than the surrounding werewolves. The wolf's skin was grayish-black, and only this werewolf's skin was glowing white, like a leader. Cassandra's eyes were full of fighting spirit. Without saying a word, she swept her leg straight at the werewolf's head. The werewolf raised his arm to block and clawed at Cassandra's heart. The big lowly did a somersault and kicked the werewolf's jaw. One was fast and the other was ruthless. After 7 or 8 moves, there was no clear winner. Barbara had always intended for Cassandra to take over her name and become the new Batgirl. Seeing that she was challenging a strong enemy, she stood at the side worriedly. Blazing Fire Beatrice and Icy Frost Dora, the former best friends, were now developing in the direction of a couple. One of them was fire and the other was ice, and their cooperation could be said to be tacit. It wasn't difficult for the heroines to deal with a group of unarmed werewolves. Having superpowers and not having superpowers were two different concepts. The werewolves' physical enhancements couldn't erase the difference in strength between the two sides. Among all the dazzling skills, there was one person who attracted the most attention. Louise Ryan, or perhaps it should be called Louise Ryan Kent. In Thea's view, Louise had far surpassed her own height in the original spacetime. She had accumulated her potential for a long time and finally had a chance to explode. The blue psychokinesis turned into substance. Flight, telekinesis, invisible force field, telekinesis impact. Other than her lack of combat experience, if Louise could exert all her strength at this time, she wouldn't be much inferior to the 3 super queens on Earth. A group of famous heroines dealing with a group of passers-by was obviously easy. When Cassandra kicked the tall werewolf, the battle came to an end. The werewolves' clothes didn't cover their bodies, and the most important thing was that they stank. Looking at their low intelligence, there was nothing to ask. Thea waved her hand and teleported everyone to the floating island in the distance. If the Eagle world was as big as Iceland, then this floating island was at most the size of a park. Unlike the werewolves who didn't cover their bodies and turned into beasts, there was still a hint of civilization here. There were all kinds of containers, huts that were so crude that even African refugees wouldn't want to live in them. Of course, there were also people. An old winged man looked at the group of heroines who suddenly appeared in front of him in panic. The old winged man mumbled something, but no one understood. Even the eagle men and eagle girls found it familiar, but they still couldn't understand. Thea raised her hand and cast an all-night language that covered the entire eagle world. She had her pride and didn't need to understand the language of these people, as long as they understood her language. As for whether this magic would make the people of the eagle world forget their original language if it existed for too long, she didn't care. The strength of this world wasn't high. Even with the support of N-Metal, they were still a bunch of weaklings. Thea could beat the entire eagle world with just her projection. Now that her real body was here, it was like a god had descended to earth. The Empress. The Empress enemy. This time, they finally heard what the old winged man said, but his language was very simple. He kept repeating words like Empress and enemy. Who's the Empress he's talking about? Barbara imitated Batman's analysis. Thea smiled and pointed not far away. The answer you want is flying over. Wings that blotted out the sky quickly flew in front of them. There were more than 300 winged people, and they were fully armed. The spears, shields, and short swords in their hands were more or less mixed with N-Metal, but the metal purity here was very low. It looked like their bodies were only slightly taller than modern people. The leader was a female winged person. She wore a golden mask that covered her entire face. Around her neck was a pure gold necklace. She wore a bright red dress and a pair of huge golden wings on her back. As the woman appeared, the winged people around her shouted, "The Empress! The Empress! The wingless outsiders!" Before the Empress could finish her words, she felt a huge pressure on her body. She tried to maintain her body, but no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't control her body and fell to the ground. When her feet touched the ground, she was a little surprised. How many years had it been? How many years had it been since she used her feet to support her body? It wasn't just her. All the winged people, from the guards to the civilians, landed on the ground without exception. No one was a fool. She naturally understood that this was the doing of these outsiders. The golden mask blocked her vision, but the N-Metal gave her the ability to see through things. She could see that there was a flow of energy that had pulled her and her clansmen down. "You're too rude," she said through gritted teeth. Chapter 998. Is that so? You're the one who's rude when you're high and mighty, Thea said nonchalantly. How dare you put on airs in front of the goddess of death? You're lucky I didn't make you kneel on the ground. At the same time, Sia was also muttering in her heart. Her goal was to swallow this small world, as well as the 2 previously abandoned worlds, and collect some N-metals while she was at it. If the winged ones were like the werewolves, it would be easy to deal with them, but they still had their own consciousness and civilization. It was not appropriate to kill them like wild beasts. Although it was easy to pin a crime on someone, she still needed evidence. Just as she was wondering if she should frame them, Starchaser made a discovery. Over there, that seems to be an ordinary person. They looked in the direction she pointed. Wasn't that right? An unconscious man was locked in an iron cage. He had no wings, and most importantly, he was wearing a pair of jeans. An Earthling. They had a spatial rift here and could go to Earth to capture humans. The few who were good at spatial magic quickly analyzed this fact. How did this person come here? What are you going to do with him? Thea pointed at the man in the cage and asked the Winged Queen. The Winged Queen sneered in her heart. Do I have to answer just because you asked? Why are the outsiders so naive? You're dreaming. How can I tell you the truth when you're asking me such a straightforward question? However, she was shocked by what she said next. Of course we'll skin and bleed him as a sacrifice to the eagle god. It's a celebration held once every 10 years. It represents our devout faith, she said without hesitation. Such sensational words instantly ignited the heroines. Such an evil act made them all emotional. Supergirl saw Thea nod and rushed out. The Winged Queen was naturally the one who told Thea the truth. Her psychological defense was too weak. She spoke her mind after being provoked a little. This saved them a lot of trouble. Skinning and killing people were evil acts. Moreover, Thea didn't feel anything about the eagle god that she mentioned. It was most likely a god that she made up to satisfy her bloodthirst. After a long time, she even believed that there was such a god waiting for her to sacrifice. The winged ones were more powerful than the werewolves below. Most importantly, they had weapons and could cooperate with each other. Ordinary heroes like Barbara and Black Canary could only fight 5 or 6 of them, and this was because the other party had lost their ability to fly. However, they had many experts on their side. All of them were battle-hardened. On the other hand, the guards had no experience in ground combat. Despite having the advantage in numbers, they were beaten back by the female heroes. Especially after the new female Green Lantern, Jessica Cruz, joined the battle, the situation began to show signs of collapse. This rookie who obtained Earth's 3rd green light ring had a very serious anxiety disorder. After being chosen by the green light ring, his condition improved slightly, but the effects were not great. It wasn't until Hal Jordan brought her to Diana, and with the help of the god of valor, that the haze in her heart was completely removed. At this time, it was as if she had been washed clean and reborn. The green light ring in her hand glowed with extraordinary brilliance. At Thea's current level of combat, the lantern ring was nothing special. However, it was an invincible existence in a primary or intermediate level battle. The stronger the conviction, the stronger the lantern ring's manifestation. The female Green Lantern almost single-handedly defeated half of the winged guards. The winged queen, who had been maintaining her poise, finally made her move. The golden claw shattered Jessica's manifestation with a single blow. After that, it did not stop and went for the throat of the new Green Lantern. Clang! Her attack was blocked by a small hammer. When the weapons of both sides collided, the queen let out a soft cry of surprise. She first looked at the other party's weapon. The N-metal had been integrated into every aspect of their lives. She was all too familiar with this metal. This was a piece of metal that had not been contaminated. In the eyes of the winged queen, the purity of this hammer was not inferior to the last few pieces of pure metal in the tribe. How could an outsider have the metal of her tribe? Supposedly, they had already plundered it clean before they rushed to this world. The winged queen looked at the hawk girl who blocked her attack with doubt. A winged person? A winged person with a metal weapon? Who are you? With Thea's language proficiency, both sides could understand each other's language. The winged queen felt that the other party was strange. The hawk girl and Hawkman also felt the same. After waking up, they thought that only the two of them had wings on their backs in the world. They did not expect that there were so many winged people in the world under their feet. All this showed that they were not alone, and this metal might be able to produce winged people in batches. Hawkman flew to the hawk girl, took off his helmet, and asked the winged queen, "Do you know me?" The winged queen felt that he was a little familiar, but her memory was very vague. 4,500 years had passed, and the past had changed. Looking back occasionally was like looking at another life. "No, I don't know you." Memories came flooding in like a tide. The winged queen could no longer control the violence in her heart. She suddenly reached out, and her 5 fingers were like 5 sharp daggers, stabbing straight into Hawkman's chest. She wanted to dig out the enemy's heart. He was giving her a headache. It happened so suddenly. Fortunately, Hawkman had been wearing Horus's wristband and moved faster than all the winged people. At the critical moment, he took a step back and avoided the fate of being cut open. However, the metallized claws still scratched 5 bloody grooves on Hawkman's chest. Hawkman used memory kill and almost killed himself. Thea found it funny. Indeed, not everyone was destined to be the main character. The winged queen attacked with all her might like a madwoman. Her helmet, bracelet, and necklace were all made of N-metals. The huge increase in attributes allowed her to suppress Hawkman and Hawkgirl alone. Pandora saw that they were in danger and immediately pulled out her gun to help. It was interesting. She knew Hawkman and Hawkgirl. When they were still Egyptian princes and priests, Pandora had been to Cairo. Unfortunately, the conversation back then was not pleasant. Pandora's theory of the 7 deadly sins was regarded as heresy and was directly expelled. Now that they met again in modern society after 4,500 years, they smiled at each other when they talked about the past. She had a good relationship with the two. Seeing that they were no match for the queen, she immediately helped. Pandora pulled out her gun to help. Psyche, who had been protected all this time, also hit the winged queen with shockwaves. 2 close-range fighters and 2 long-range fighters joined forces and barely stopped the winged queen. The rest of the superpowered people, Fire, Ice, Frost Killer, Raven, Zatanna, and Louise, began to pour energy magic on the winged people guards. Thea continued to play with her bow and arrow. Diana was too lazy to fight enemies of this level. She also took out her bow and arrow, shooting at whoever was in danger. Yes, Diana also knew how to shoot. Chapter 999. Their equipment is the extraordinary metal you mentioned. Diana turned to ask Thea after shooting down a winged person guard with an arrow. Yes, the effect is amazing for ordinary people. Speaking of which, your archery skills have regressed. It's a pity that you lost Antiope's teaching. The battle in front of them wasn't that intense, so the young lady went off topic. The Valkyrie's face was a little red. Her archery skills were actually quite good. Even if she suppressed it to the level of an ordinary person, it wouldn't be a problem for her to win the championship in the Olympics. After all, she had trained hard with Antiope when she was young, but it depended on who she was competing with. If she didn't have talent in archery, then she didn't have talent. Unfortunately, the archery talent of the Quinn family had been maxed out. It was an ability that came with their bloodline. Although Sia had been slacking off, her archery skills were still better than hers. You win in archery, let's compete in javelins. The Valkyrie proposed, unwilling to admit defeat. Sure. They put away their bows as if there was no one else around. Diana took out 2 javelins. This was a divine weapon she made in her spare time. It could be thrown out and come back on its own. In addition to this function, it also had some special features such as sharpness, anti-magic, super long range, and double damage to wild beasts. However, these were all supplementary features. At their current level, they weren't worth mentioning. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The sound of the javelins piercing through the air was constantly heard. The 2 goddesses took down an enemy with each javelin. In terms of skill, Diana was definitely better than Thea. The Assassin League didn't practice javelins at all. When the ninja masters were still hot-blooded youths resisting the Crusades, javelins were no longer used. Not to mention in modern society. Except for professional athletes, who would practice javelins. However, the Quinn family's long-range expertise was still useful. Plus, javelins weren't complicated. In the end, it ended in a draw. 1 win and 1 draw. Thea looked at Diana provocatively. She meant, what do you think? Are you convinced? Diana gritted her teeth to show that she wasn't convinced. She began to pick from her collection. She had to choose one to compete with and win at least 1 round. Suddenly, she saw something and her eyes lit up. Then she took out 2 strange ropes and each of them took one. What is this? Thea looked at it for a long time, but she couldn't tell what kind of weapon it was. It wasn't the lasso that Diana often used, nor was it one of those indescribable props that the 2 of them used when sparring. Diana snorted. This is the oldest weapon. I spent a lot of time practicing it. After saying that, she demonstrated it to Thea on the spot. She reached out and brushed the surface of the lasso, and a stone the size of an egg appeared on the lasso. Then, she lifted the lasso high above her head and found a target. With a flick of her wrist, the stone flew out with inertia. Bang! A winged person guard was hit in the chest by a stone, and he fainted on the spot as if he had been hit by a truck. It's a catapult. How about you give it a try? Diana looked at Thea provocatively. The eldest Miss' expression changed drastically. Stone catapults. This thing had already been withdrawn from the battlefield during the era of the 300 Spartan warriors. Who would use such an obscure weapon? She gave Diana a look that said, "You win this time." She picked up the catapult nervously and imitated her. She found a target, spun 3 or 4 times, and threw it out with a whoosh. Unfortunately, the Quinn family's talent didn't work this time. The moment the stone left the lasso, it deviated from its trajectory. Thea watched as it flew further and further away, and finally flew over Supergirl's shoulder. Supergirl pouted and glared at her. Thea smiled apologetically like a Chinook cat. The result of the competition was self-evident. If one didn't spend some time practicing this catapult, they really couldn't play it. One win, one draw, and one loss. In the end, it was a draw. The two goddesses had a lot of fun, and the battle in the Eagle world ended with the heroine's victory. The winged person queen's mask was taken off. After wearing it for a long time, her facial features had regressed. Her eyes were small, her nose was flat, and her skin had a metallic luster. Eagle Man felt that she looked familiar, but Eagle Girl recognized this woman. "Don't you recognize her? She's the previous priestess of Chayala," Eagle Girl said expressionlessly. Under Hawkman's strange gaze, Hawkgirl continued, "Yes, it's my respected mother." The remaining heroines looked like onlookers, watching the reunion of mother and daughter. The winged person queen was still agitated, but with Thea's help, she quickly calmed down. With her narration, the secret history of mankind was finally unveiled. The winged person queen was Eagle Girl's mother, but their relationship was no different from that of a passerby. Chayala was the special name of their priestess. As long as one became a priestess, they would automatically use this name. Many countries and races in the world had this custom. Its meaning was nothing more than to prove that one was God's messenger, and that one was eternal and indestructible. Originally, Eagle Girl would follow the path of her predecessors and become her priestess. Then, she would choose one of her daughters to inherit the name of Chayala and become the next priestess. However, history changed, and an alien spaceship landed on Earth. The alien spaceship did not stay on Earth for too long. They either accidentally or intentionally captured Eagle Man and Eagle Girl. However, the spaceship seemed to have a problem with its piloting system. It liked to crash into planets with its hull. In the end, they crashed on Zamalan, the main planet of the Purple Lantern. Eagle Man and Eagle Girl were inexperienced ancient people. They were thrown on a deserted planet. No matter how much they cried for help, they could not eat metal. The two starved to death. After they died, they became the main energy source of the Purple Lantern because of love until the darkest night came. On Egypt's side, the Eagle tribe had always been hidden among the country's rulers. They realized the powerful effect of metal. Whether it was wings or the strength on their bodies, it made them different from ordinary people. Pharaohs, generals, and powerful people all over the world had their eyes on them. The Eagle tribe did not want to give up the power they had. However, Earth's gravity was too strong. Except for a few leaders, the rest of the tribe could not fly freely with their wings. After a series of experiments, such as oracles and blood sacrifices, they left Egypt with all the metal and their people, went to Peru, and finally entered this world. The Bear tribe and the Wolf tribe had similar experiences. The three parties agreed to enter the small world to live a good life, leaving the bad natural environment of the Earth, which was prone to earthquakes, floods, and sandstorms, to their inferior people. Unfortunately, the small world they thought was a paradise became worse and worse because of a large number of people. The Bear tribe was exterminated with the collapse of the world, and a part of the Wolf tribe escaped before the world was destroyed. More than half of them came to the Eagle world, and a small group of people went to the more comfortable Earth. There were many legends of werewolves in the cultures of various countries. The three major tribes were made and destroyed by metal. Chapter 1000. The N-metal gave them a lot of superpowers and a long lifespan, but it also made them unable to leave this metal. Moreover, after a long period of interaction, a slight resonance was formed between humans and the metal. The longer the metal was in contact with humans, the lower the purity of the metal itself. The metal was their life. In order to maintain her ruling position, the queen targeted the Wolf tribe that came to join them. The bloody massacre began. The Wolf tribe was robbed of their remaining metal and eventually became wild beasts. Even so, the consumption of metal was still huge. The Empress had also stolen the metal of her own tribe's civilians. Now, she was the only one who still maintained a high battle prowess and a high lifespan of 4,500 years. The rest of the tribe had already reproduced for dozens of generations. They had also set their sights on Earth. Unfortunately, there was no such metal in the real world. They would only weaken themselves if they stayed on Earth. After invading Earth several times, other than leaving some legends of the Harpies, there was no other meaning. Waiting for death was the only thought in the Queen's mind. How much do you know about the Bat tribe? Thea had already understood everything about the Eagle world. She finally asked about the original purpose of this operation. At the mention of the Bat tribe, the Queen recalled for a while and a trace of fear appeared in her eyes. They are all demons, evil spirits that crawled out from hell. The Queen spoke intermittently and used a lot of adjectives. Some of the words were repeated over and over again. They only understood after a long time. The Bat tribe had entered the Iron Age when they were still using bronze weapons. Perhaps Batman's style had influenced them. They liked to move in the middle of the night, wearing black cloaks, and then piercing sharp iron weapons into the hearts of their enemies. They had the most metal in their hands. Unfortunately, they followed the principle of secrecy and rarely communicated with the other three tribes. After leaving Earth, the two sides did not have any contact. However, the Queen felt that most of their people were still on Earth. Thea agreed. Many of the famous assassinations in modern society could be seen. An unknown person killed an important person and changed history according to a certain predetermined trajectory. The assassination of Grand Duke Ferdinand, Ito Hirobumi, Lincoln, and Bruce's parents in that small alley. History had been crudely altered, and there was a clue hidden behind the scenes. They were doing everything they could to help Bruce become Batman. As for whether Batman established the Bat tribe first, or whether the tribe entered human society and created Batman through a series of events, who was the beginning and who was the end, it was meaningless in the face of time. The collective activity of the Female Righteous Alliance had ended successfully. They had rescued many Earthlings who had been captured by them, but these winged race prisoners still needed to be dealt with. It was definitely impossible to dig a hole and bury it. It was also not appropriate to let it go so easily. From time to time, they would go to Earth to capture a few people and torture them. Their hands were stained with blood. Locking them up in a prison would require an extremely large prison that prohibited superpowers. It would be better to just leave them in the Eagle world with that time cost. As for depriving them of their metals and turning them into ordinary people, that was even more inhumane. Without their metals, more than half of them would die in 3 days. In the end, Louise made a suggestion to freeze them all and wait for humans to research the mysteries of metals. After that, the curse would be lifted and they would be sent to prison to serve their sentences. Thea vetoed this idea as it was too troublesome. She called Superman over and threw these winged race people, who looked very Kryptonian, into the Phantom Zone. Back then, Zod and Fura had been thrown in there before. There was no concept of time there, and it was a good place for long-term imprisonment. After dealing with the winged race and the werewolves, Thea packed up all the resources of the Eagle world and took them away. The remaining metals had pitifully low purity, and only the few accessories on the Queen were barely acceptable. Looking at the pitiful Eagle hero and Eagle girl, Thea gave them a portion of the high-purity metals and gave some to Barbara for research. Thea did not care if she handed them over to Batman after the event. She kept more than half of the remaining metals for herself. Then, with a wave of her hand, she grabbed the world's origin and poured it into her own small world. She did not let go of the bear world and the wolf world, and each of them extracted a small group of sparkling and dazzling world origin. Among them, the bear world's origin was the smallest, because the world had been destroyed for too long, and the origin was almost exhausted. The wolf world was slightly stronger, but there was a limit to it. The eagle world was the best and the most complete. Perhaps the N-metal had been in this world for too long, and the origin was also mixed with a trace of metallic luster. The 3 groups of origin were all transferred into her own world, and the area of the whole world doubled. Thea just looked at it and did not ask any more questions. At this time, the world was still a small world and had not evolved to the level of a universe. The whole world was still in the accumulation stage. When all the conditions were met, the world would begin to shrink and produce a complete Big Bang, and the world would be officially formed into a universe. The inspection of Earth was still in full swing. Moira introduced some new policies, such as exchanging guns for food. The reason was definitely not to ban guns. The excuse used by the White House was that old guns were easy to misfire, and for the safety of the general public, the old guns and ammunition were recycled. In addition, a new personal file database was also established. All the talents who had been engaged in the nuclear industry, chemistry, polymer, atomic physics, and other cutting-edge industries had to re-establish their files. If they could go to the government every month and do a simple registration work, then they would receive an additional subsidy. This money was jointly funded by several major consortia in the world, such as the Quinn Group and the Wayne Group, to protect talents and prevent them from being hijacked by terrorists. Earth was in full swing to solve the internal problems. On this day, Thea had just returned home when she was shocked by a piece of news and hurriedly transmitted to the Blue Lamp main star. The lamp beasts are missing. This was the news that the saint reported to her. Which lamp beasts are missing? When did this happen? Who did it? The saint felt guilty and stammered for a long time before he explained the whole story. After 3 expeditions to Earth, everything was calm and there was no abnormality. It was not until yesterday that he noticed that the blue lamp energy in his body seemed to have dropped a lot out of thin air. After checking several times, it was not the problem of the ring, and his emotions were not shaken. Then what was the problem? Several people studied for a long time and finally found that the lamp beasts that had been staying in the total energy of the lamp ring had disappeared. There were very few people who could communicate with the lamp beasts. The total energy was placed there, and no one was bored enough to look inside to see if the lamp beasts were still there. The lamp beasts also did not have the habit of waking up early to check in. They had been missing for a long time, but they really did not know when they disappeared. Chapter 1001. With the intention of helping each other, they informed the yellow and blue lanterns. The blue lanterns were the most sensitive to energy, while the yellow and blue lanterns were much less sensitive. After being alerted by the blue lanterns, they checked their home and found that their lantern beasts were also missing. They then asked the purple lanterns. The purple lanterns' main planet had been destroyed, and their lantern beasts had been placed on the blue lanterns' main planet. The result was self-evident. They were also missing. I remember that Moji was guarding it. Who has the ability to steal the lantern beasts without a trace? Thea was a little surprised. Moji's mental power was countless times stronger than a human's. Even if she was still young, as a planet with its own consciousness, coupled with the lantern ring, she was quite strong. She could not think of anyone who could do such a thing. Detective Thea had not found the thief, and bad news came one after another. The green lantern ion shark flew away in front of everyone. The orange lantern Larfleeze was knocked unconscious while writing his Christmas present. When he woke up, he found that the orange lantern beast python had also disappeared. Seeing Thea, Larfleeze felt as if he had seen his family. Although Thea always yelled at him and ordered him around like a soldier, she had never taken anything from him. Instead, she had given him several containers of treasures. Now that he had been wronged, he could no longer hold back his grief. He did a standard 5-meter sprint, kneeling down and hugging her thigh. Thea moved extremely quickly and sent him flying with a kick. Larfleeze cried like a teary dog. With snot and tears, he asked Thea to uphold justice for him. The Missy was speechless. When did she become the leader of the 7 lanterns? Why did she not know? She had a vague guess in her heart. It was not until the remnants of the Red Lantern Corps came to the Blue Lantern's main planet that the answer was revealed. Colonna, it's Colonna. I can't be wrong. Atakaitas gritted his teeth. He was covered in injuries. His red clothes were not obvious, but if one looked closely, they would find that his blood had completely dyed his clothes red. This long-lived species' injuries were far more serious than they looked. Colonna was also a member of the Little Blue Men. Hundreds of millions of years ago, he had secretly modified the settings of the mechanical hunter without telling his Little Blue Men colleagues, causing the massacre in Sector 666. His original intention was to say that machines were not trustworthy and that only emotions could control emotions. This matter had a far-reaching impact on the universe. Kelowna was exiled, the mechanical hunters were all abandoned, the Green Lantern Corps became the new subordinates of the Guardians, and Red Lantern Atakaita's revenge. Until the recent Night of Darkness, everything was related to this massacre. There were only a few black technology experts in the entire DC world. If one were to make a list of them, Batman would be ranked third, Joe Ale would be ranked second, and Kelowna would be ranked first. Furthermore, he was the first person to have ever been able to use technology to create a cosmic probe that traced back to the moment of creation, thus creating a parallel dimension and allowing the universe to evolve into the era of the multiverse. He represented a possibility that technology could also reach the pinnacle. Tracing back to creation was something that the new gods, the Watchers, and the Anti-Watchers could not do. However, the real culprit shocked Thea. She looked at Atakaitas strangely. Kelowna is already dead. If my sources are correct, his body is still on your Red Lantern main planet. She had definitely been on guard against such a black technology expert. Whether it was Haruba's memories, the 4 advisors of the underworld, or Ganthicide, she had inquired about the little blue men, whether they were alive or dead. As Kelowna's student, Haruba had a deep impression of his teacher. Among the advisors, Ganther and the others were certain that Kelowna was dead, completely dead. Moreover, his body was stolen by Atakaitas, but that was many years ago. In Haruba's memories, Atakaitas had an inexplicable affection for Kelowna. He believed that Kelowna had made him who he was today. Thea analyzed that it was a bit like Stockholm Syndrome, but countless times more severe. Atakaitas would run to Kelowna's body to talk to him. The Guardians knew about this. What was the situation now? A guy who had been dead for God knows how long had come back to life. Her expression was a little cold. Atakaitas, don't tell me you're the one who resurrected him. The Red Lantern leader wanted to refute loudly, but when he saw Thea's expression, he knew that she knew him very well. He held back his anger and shook his head. It wasn't me. After looking at him again, Thea finally believed in Atakaitas. Hatred was the root of his power. His feelings for Kelowna would not make him give up on his hatred. It was not surprising that he was able to silently obtain the 4 lantern beasts from the blue lamp. Mogo must have thought that Kelowna was a guardian and must have watched him swagger away the lantern beasts. But how did this guy come back to life? Thea was a little confused. It was easy to resurrect someone who had just died not long ago. It was understandable that he had some tricks up his sleeve. But this guy had been dead for hundreds of millions of years. His body had been dried and turned into a specimen. How did he come back to life? And why did he steal the lantern beasts? The lantern beasts were prepared for Kyle Rayner, she pondered for a few seconds. Countless thoughts collided in her mind. Losing the lantern beasts at this point in time was very fatal. If Kyle did not bring the lantern beasts into the Wall of Origin and recharge the emotional spectrum pool, the current universe would explode into dust due to emotional exhaustion. The scientific name was hard reboot. When Thea thought of this, she began to sweat. As the world's top technologist, she felt that Kelowna most likely knew about this as well. So she took drastic measures and stole all the lantern beasts. Find. Mobilize all forces to find this guy in the universe. The 7 Lantern Corps, her subordinates, the Sharp Insect Tribe, Lady STYX, and the Commerce Alliance were all mobilized at the same time. They had to find this guy as soon as possible. Not long after, Batman's communicator rang. There's a strange guy on Earth. Before Batman could finish, Thea interrupted him. There's a very, very big problem in the universe. I'll leave Earth to you. We'll talk after I'm done here. Okay. Batman hung up. After another 2 minutes, Diana's call also came. You should come over and take a look. This guy is different from the ones I've seen before. The Valkyrie spoke so seriously that Thea finally took it seriously. It wouldn't take much time to go over and take a look. She left the Blue Lantern main planet and returned to Earth. When she entered, she saw that everyone from the Righteous Alliance was there. She looked at Diana, Batman, and the others, waiting for someone to explain to her. What happened? A strange guy. Who was it? What's the matter? If it's not urgent, it's best to put it aside for now. There's a big crisis in the universe. She really didn't want to be involved now. Take a look. There's a strange guy outside the watchtower this morning. He's been observing us. He didn't speak or attack. Diana hurriedly explained to her. In fact, they didn't collect much information. Thea still cared about Diana. The universe crisis was not as important as Diana, at least in her heart. She took a look and looked up at the watchtower space base. What she saw almost made her jaw drop. She saw a guy with a big head, white eyes, and a thin neck. He looked like Papa Ma, but he was more than 10 times bigger than Papa Ma. He seemed to sense her gaze and looked at Thea. Of course, Papa Ma wasn't scary. Instead, he looked kind and approachable. This was all nonsense. The key was that Thea knew this guy. If she wasn't wrong, this guy was the observer of Marvel World. Chapter 1002. The observer came from the world of Marvel. This memory couldn't be wrong. They were the oldest race in Marvel. Unlike the little blue people in DC who didn't cause trouble every day, they had a promise to only observe and not participate. They were a neutral race to the extreme. But was there really a world of Marvel? Thea was confused. If she thought about it carefully, since there was a world of DC, then it wasn't too far-fetched to have a world of Marvel. Her worldview received 100 points of impact, and she quickly thought about the observer's intentions for coming here. You know this guy. Is he also a friend of yours from the universe? Superman asked. Thea had a toothache, and her mouth tasted bitter. For the first time, she didn't know how to explain this matter. This was a character from outside the world. For Batman and Superman, there was no difference between the observer, guardian, and watcher, but for someone of her level, it was a very serious matter. This meant that a hole had been pierced through the DC world, or else the observer wouldn't have come here. An hour ago, she still couldn't think of anyone who could do this. Now, there was a 99% chance that it was Kelowna. But what was the observer observing here? Or who was he observing? Thea wanted to go up and ask, but she remembered that the observer was famous for not talking and only recording. She probably wouldn't be able to get any inside information. Thea's gaze swept across the faces of the Alliance, and after checking twice, she seemed to have found something new. She gently exhaled, ran 2 steps, and pulled out a thin old man from the air beside Batman. Diana pulled out her sword, and Batman was also shocked. How did this guy silently hide beside him? He looked at Thea with a puzzled face, waiting for further explanation. The rest of the Alliance also looked at the old man. He was wearing a golden robe with silver embroidery at the corners. He looked very elegant, but his hair was a little messy, and his temperament was a little slippery. Even though the old man was discovered, he still looked at everyone sneakily. The slippery old man looked at everyone, and finally his eyes fell on Thea. Little girl, you have good taste. Thea's face drooped as she sized him up from head to toe. His concealment technique was not bad, but there weren't many energy waves. This should be a projection. She asked with certainty, you are Gao Tianzuan, right? How did you come to our universe? He had originally wanted to use honorifics, but the old man's temperament was too terrible, making people unable to respect him from the bottom of their heart. She spoke vaguely, connecting everyone to the parallel universe or something. Only Diana had some doubts. Now, the Valkyrie could even fight her own father, Zeus, 400s of rounds. She was only 1 god's seat away from the multiverse level. She was no longer ignorant about the multiverse like before. But who was Gao Tianzuan? She didn't remember Thea telling her that there was such a person in the universe, but she was smart enough not to ask. Ah, you do have good taste, millimeter, I am Gao Tianzuan. The slippery old man put away his wretched appearance, as if he wanted to puff out his chest and raise his head to make himself look taller, but his acting was a little exaggerated. Thea covered her face. His long life had turned this guy into a clown. The real Gao Tianzuan had immortal life, immune to aging, diseases, and all physical attacks. At the same time, he also had unimaginable recovery abilities. He could also convert his own universal energy into levitation, projection, psychic ability, material reconstruction, time and space jump, and so on. Moreover, he had a powerful resurrection ability, and could resurrect intelligent creatures that died within 30 minutes. Jiao Tianzuan was a member of the Universal Presbyterian Church. It could be said that he was a person who couldn't be killed by conventional forces. At first, he was a wise and cold elder. As for how he became this clown today, it could only be said that he was too bored without any enemies for a long time. If he didn't find some entertainment for himself, he would be stupid. Thea didn't know how many times she sighed today. She pointed to Father Ma in the sky. The observer outside followed you here, right? By the way, what are you doing here? Jiao Tianzuan's eyes flickered, and finally stopped on Thea and Batman. Which one of you is the ruler of this universe? Or is this a democratic system? CEO? Elder. I do have something to say, but I don't know who to tell. Thea waved at him, indicating that he should talk to her. Jiao Tianzuan's vision was still there, and he could see that Batman was extraordinary. Perhaps in his heart, Batman was more important than Diana. This was also the main reason why he had been hiding beside Batman to observe. Thea wasn't ready to reveal the connection. Batman was also stunned. He didn't have as much foresight as Thea, but he was good at observation and thinking. This strange person actually compared him to Thea. It definitely wasn't because of his 127 sets of martial arts. A strong person came to my universe. He appeared 3 days ago, and he is an invincible strong person. His name is Kelowna. Jiao Tianzuan's words shattered the last bit of hope in Thea's heart. The person who caused all this trouble was indeed Kelowna. As for how he got to Marvel, it had nothing to do with the Lantern Beast. It was most likely some shocking technological product. Thea frowned deeply. Whether she liked it or not, things were out of her control. This group of people who made technology was too good at causing trouble. Ha, ha. Kelowna is on your side, right? Jiao Tianzuan clicked his tongue, and a smug expression appeared on his face as if he had finally found the culprit. Ah. Thea rubbed her hair, not knowing what to do. Everyone in the Righteous Alliance could see that there was definitely a huge problem here, but the heroes were ignorant and fearless. Batman was still pondering over Jiao Tianzuan's words when Superman asked kindly, "What kind of trouble is it? We can definitely solve it if we unite." Diana also held her hand, expressing her encouragement. The young lady looked troubled and depressed. Our universe is in big trouble. The danger this time is far greater than the Dark Knight, and it is also greater than the Anti-Watcher. Barry asked, "Is it the Kelowna you were talking about just now? Where is this guy from? An alien, an enemy from a parallel universe, or from the future?" Thea said softly, "Kelowna is the former guardian of the Green Lantern Corps." Everyone in the Righteous Alliance showed an expression of awe, as expected. Most of the things that happened recently were related to the Green Lantern Corps. Now, the Justice League was about to become the Green Lantern Corps Aftermath Committee. The Arab Green Lantern Simon Baz and the first female Green Lantern from Earth, Jessica Cruz, were pretending to be invisible. Hal Jordan, the greatest Green Lantern, suddenly became the focus of attention. He was dumbfounded. What Kelowna? He had never heard of him. Chapter 1003. Thea helped Hal explain, Kelowna was the previous Guardian, but he died hundreds of millions of years ago. Not many people in the Green Lantern Corps know about this secret. Kelowna was the greatest scientist on planet Martus. I don't know much about his life, but I know that he had a strong desire to explore and was extremely curious about everything. He was the kind of person who wouldn't give up until he found the answer. As soon as she finished speaking, everyone looked at Batman. They also had a guy who liked to get to the bottom of things. Batman pretended not to see the gazes around him and asked, "How did someone who died hundreds of millions of years ago come back to life? Was he resurrected during the darkest night?" Thea shook her head. "It has something to do with the darkest night. From the information I've gathered so far, He had mastered the Book of Death of the Black Lanterns and sealed a part of his life force in the book. When a certain condition was met in the outside world, the Book of Death would return that part of his life force to him, and he would naturally come back to life. She didn't have much of a prophetic advantage when it came to Colonna. This was the conclusion she came to after gathering information from several sources. The only thing that was similar to the original spacetime was that Lisa Dracker, the fangirl who swore to follow Colonna to death, was still bewitched by the Book of Death. She was probably the one who found the Book of Death and resurrected Colonna. Not only did Colonna come back to life, but his goal was also so strong. He wanted to find the truth of the universe's creation. Your universe actually has such a madman, it's unbelievable. Gao Tianzuan, who had been pretending to be invisible, interjected naturally, as if he was very familiar with them. Batman nodded. Well, a mad scientist who seeks the truth, there are many people like that on Earth. I think I understand. And then there's today's story. This guy stole the 7 lantern beasts, broke through the space barrier, and went to another world. Let me introduce him to you. This old man is a member of the Universal Presbyterian Church, Gao Tianzuan. They are the first highly intelligent race to appear after the Big Bang. Thea introduced Gao Tianzuan. Gao Tianzuan pretended to nod to them, but no one paid him any attention. What? The lantern beasts are lost. Plasma sharks are lost too? Hearing this news, Hal Jordan was shocked. Thea looked at him strangely. What happened to the promised green light leader? Those fellows saw that you were an Earthling and were easier to fool, so they used you as a shield. The rest of the people didn't think much of it. If they lost it, then so be it. What's the big deal? As for this mad scientist going to another universe, we can pay close attention to him. If he needs support, we can also provide it. It doesn't seem to be a very urgent matter. Diana was the one who knew Miss Thea the best. She knew that there must be something else. What danger will the disappearance of the lantern beasts cause to the universe? Thea couldn't tell them that the emotion pool was drying up and the universe was about to explode. Otherwise, she would have to explain the series of arrangements she made on Kyle. If the heroes knew that Kyle was going to sacrifice himself for the universe, they would definitely help. If 7 or 8 of them rushed into the Wall of Origin, where would she find the life equation? Fortunately, making up lies was a talent of the Quinn family. She said sadly, the lantern beasts represent an emotion in the universe. If they leave for too long, we will lose this emotion forever. Our universe will have no anger, no greed, no fear, no courage, no hope, no pity, and no love. I can't imagine that scene, she said sadly. Thea's lies were very convincing. She was the authority on the spectrum of emotions, and no one could refute her. Several people also wore lantern rings during the dark night. There were 3 in front of the green light, and Batman still had the yellow light ring in his pocket. It was not impossible to accept the materialization of emotions. A bunch of people believed her instantly. They couldn't tolerate it. If there was no anger, greed, or fear, then so be it. However, they couldn't live without hope, courage, and love. Colonna is the strongest enemy we have to deal with at the moment. If you don't want to join the battle, I won't force you. Thea said righteously. As expected, none of the heroes backed down. Strongest? Why do you call him the strongest? He's stronger than Darkseid? Batman asked Thea. In fact, he really wanted to kick Gao Tianzuan out, an outsider, but he kept smiling at him. He didn't want to go too far. After all, it seemed like he was here to ask for help. That's right. He's the strongest because he's doing something very terrifying now. It's something I can't do at the moment. What is it? 2 worlds. Thea pointed at herself and then at Gao Tianzuan. The 2 worlds are getting closer to each other. Colonna is using some method that I don't understand to forcefully merge the 2 worlds with completely different rules. Then what should we do? Superman asked. Thea didn't know what to do. The 2 worlds had completely different rules. If she rushed over, she might not be able to use much of her strength. Moreover, she felt that she probably couldn't defeat Colonna. Although this guy was a technologist, he was already at the top of his game. He had some strange tricks up his sleeve that were impossible to guard against. Besides, who in Marvel could help her? She couldn't ask Asgard's goddess of death, Hela, for help, could she? Everyone in the Righteous Alliance wanted to help. She couldn't ask Jiao Tianzuan aside, so she had to make the conversation public. What's the situation on your side? What's your purpose for coming here? She asked Jiao Tianzuan. Jiao Tianzuan seemed to have suddenly remembered something. He said happily, "We made a bet. Each side will choose a warrior to fight." Before he finished, Thea interrupted him. "This is fake. He doesn't care about your bet at all. He just wants to see the two worlds merge and be destroyed, and peek at the secret of creation." Jiao Tianzuan shook his head in disbelief. Thea didn't want to talk to him at first, but she thought that she couldn't do without help in Marvel. If she asked for help, Captain America would most likely support her, but his combat power was debatable. She didn't believe a word of his American spirit. Was there such a thing as spirit in America? How much was it? She turned to Jiao Tianzuan and yelled, "Idiot! That guy was just being perfunctory. Can't you tell? When the two universes merge, everything you have will be changed beyond recognition. You're the only one who still cares about the bet. Tell me, how did you get here? Let's go and take care of him together." In fact, it was safest to team up with the Ghost. Unfortunately, the Ghost boss was limited by this world. He couldn't leave unless the two worlds merged completely. But by then, it would be too late. Chapter 1004. Jiao Tianzuan must have been very smart when he was young. After all, he was an elder of the universe. Now, his IQ was no different from a little blue man. He was more interested in fooling around than in serious matters. Just by looking at how this guy ran over to his side like a fool, without any investigation or preparation, it was obvious. The matter with Kelowna was just a game to Jiao Tianzuan. As for whether this game would eventually cost him his life, he did not even think about it. Now that Thea had a lot of experience in dealing with long-lived species, the best way was to scare them. These guys were too strong, their lifespans were too long, and they were usually unbearably slow. However, once something that threatened their lives appeared, they would more or less pull themselves together. "I haven't fought for many years," Jiao Tianzuan mumbled. Thea was also very troubled. Fate had once again pushed her into the teeth of the storm. If she wanted to be the second sister of death, the equation of life was very important. The equation was behind the wall of origin. Even if she did not care about the problem of the universe exploding and did not charge the emotional pool, no one knew if she could still bring the equation out. Back to the original problem, she still needed Kyle Rayner and the Seven Lantern Beasts. Two universes with different rules were pulled out separately to fuse. From her perspective, the possibility of an explosion was as high as 90%. In a chain explosion, it might even blow up 7 or 8 parallel universes. Kelowna, the mad scientist, wanted to find the answer to creation in the explosion. Even if he was lucky enough to succeed, this universe would fuse with Marvel's side. When that happened, whether the rules would be rewritten, and whether there would be an equation behind the wall was unknown. Unless she gave up on the equation and stayed in the underworld for the rest of her life, she would have to step forward bravely to eliminate this crisis. Thea's expression was ugly. Jiao Tianzuan thought about it and told her the coordinates of his world. Of course, he used their description method. As she listened, she tried to use this method to decipher it. She was lucky. The two worlds did not differ much in terms of teleportation. With her knowledge, she understood everything after thinking about it for a while. "I'll go first this time. Wait for my news." At the very least, she wanted to see what level Kelowna was at now. There was no need to let Superman and the others test him. If she could beat him, she would capture him. If she couldn't, she would run away. Diana no longer cared about what these people thought. She pulled Thea to the side and asked in a low voice, "Is it dangerous?" "I'll go with you." She knew her lover's habits too well. Thea was a lazy person. Unless she had no other choice, she would not personally go into battle. It was rare for her to take the lead so actively this time. This could only mean one thing: the enemy was very dangerous. Thea caressed her hair and, to Jiao Tianzuan's surprise, she and Diana kissed each other on the spot. Even if I can't win, I can still run. A small portion of the laws of the two worlds have already fused together. No existence can kill me. She said this with confidence. The worst that could happen was that she would be beaten to a state of near death. How could she die first? The two goddesses hugged for a long time before Diana let go of her. The Valkyrie's eyes were firm and she took 2 steps back. Thea carefully corrected the coordinates and then used her own method to open the teleportation channel. Time, space, dimension, and as for the location, she had to calculate. The strength of the enemy was not clear. She did not want to directly fall in front of the enemy. At least, she had to secretly observe. After changing into her Goddess of Death outfit, she slightly adjusted her landing point and set her target on the opposite Earth. Even if her strength was reduced by half, no one on Earth could stop her. Diana looked at her affectionately like a little wife who was going to send her husband to battle. "I'll go take a look. I'll be back soon." She declined everyone's help and stepped through the teleportation portal. The dark teleportation made her a little dizzy because of the different laws of the two worlds. When her feet touched the ground, she quickly felt it. It was good news. She could use about 70% of her strength here. Her 5th dimensional ability had completely disappeared, and her magic power had been damaged. She needed to familiarize herself with the laws of magic here. Divine power was also affected, but because she had left the limit of the source, she could still absorb some power from the other world. After checking herself, she had enough confidence and had the leisure to observe her surroundings. Dark clouds covered the sun, and the heavy weather made people feel depressed. She frowned slightly. She was on a green field, and there was a faint whistling sound of the sea not far away. Although there were some slight differences, she still judged that this was Earth, the Earth of Marvel World. She had no time to continue looking around, because there were 2 people not far away who were eyeing her. On the left was a muscular man. His body looked like it could compete with Superman. He was holding a hammer in his right hand, wearing a black leather vest and a big red cloak behind him. The most important thing was his appearance. He had golden hair, thick eyebrows, and a beard. His eyes contained power, and he had a dignified demeanor. With his appearance and hammer, Thea realized that this guy was Thor. Since this fierce brother was Thor, then the man beside him with dark green windbreaker, black hair, and a pale face was Loki. For a moment, Thea couldn't figure out what the 2 brothers were doing here. The sky was high and the clouds were heavy. There was no sign of human habitation, and the grass was quite dense. Were they practicing wrestling? Her expression was a little strange. Coupled with the way she appeared and the way she dressed, Thor, who had begun to use his brain, stared at her closely. "You are Hela." "I am Thor, the son of Odin." Although Thor said it as a question, the certainty in his tone could be heard. Thea was a little stunned. "What should I say?" "Hero, you got the wrong person. When I was teleporting just now, I seemed to have squeezed someone. Your big sister might still be behind me." She subconsciously replied, "Really? You are quite similar to him." After all, this guy was the main force of the double couplet, so there was no need to be hostile. Loki, who was standing beside Thor, noticed the problem. This guy who looked like the goddess of death didn't seem to be as fierce as the legends said. He said, "Maybe we can discuss it." Thea didn't have a good impression of this traitor. She valued her family very much, and Loki was obviously not this kind of person. She frowned slightly and pointed at Loki. "You don't look like Odin." She wouldn't affect the overall situation because of her personal preferences. Thinking of her purpose, Thea said in a clear voice, "This universe is about to face a catastrophe. You'd better gather your companions to face it together." Loki sneered. "You think the 2 of us are not your opponents? Do you need to gather everyone together to satisfy your desire to kill?" Chapter 1005. Without the language proficiency from fusing with the Source Queen, Loki spoke quickly and hurriedly. Thea did not hear him clearly. She asked in surprise. What did you say? Hearing his brother talk about killing, Thor's habit of not thinking before acting up acted up again. I will not betray any of my friends, you evil god. Before he finished speaking, he swung his right arm in a half circle. Mjolnir, the divine weapon war hammer made from the core of a planet, was thrown out with a whoosh. Damn. Can't we talk nicely? Throwing out a hammer without saying anything, what kind of bad habit is that? She felt that he was a little different from the impulsive Thor in her impression, but now it seemed that he was still the same. Sia sighed. Her power had declined a little in this world, especially her position of god of death, which was greatly suppressed here. Unsurprisingly, the death of the 5 great gods of creation had taken over the source of her power. She could not extract much death divine power, but because she obtained the emotion divine seat, which was something that all life had, her power was barely maintained at 70%. She reached out with her right hand and grabbed Thor's hammer with 5 slender fingers. Thor gritted his teeth and used all his strength to try to get the hammer out of her right hand. However, his strength seemed to have been thrown into the void. The hammer was still firmly in Thea's hand. As they fought, the ground began to shake slightly. Thea wanted to throw the hammer back to him, but the hammer kept shaking. Thor was also controlling it. If she let go now, she would hurt herself. Both sides were in a stalemate. Your timeline is wrong. Come back quickly. A valiant woman's voice echoed in their ears. Thor and Loki could not tell who it was. Thea frowned slightly. It was Diana's voice. Their love extended through the spectrum of emotions, breaking through the distance of time and space. That shouldn't be. She began to think about which step went wrong. Logically speaking, with her level of attainment, it was impossible for her to make a mistake. Come back quickly. Jiao Tianzuan's concept of time is a bit vague. You're 2 years too early. Diana said angrily. She almost pulled her back with a lasso. Thea was furious. Jiao Tianzuan, this idiot with no concept of time, caused him to come early. Being in another world, the characteristics of the divine power of emotions was similar to that of the tides. It fluctuated between high and low, and it was extremely unstable. Her control over her body had reached the lowest level in history. In her excitement, her fingers unknowingly increased the strength. Catcher, catcher. An ear-piercing cracking sound was heard. Only then did she see that the hammer in her hand was already covered with web-like cracks. Before she could think of a way to fix it, she saw that the star core was finally unable to bear the burden and was violently crushed. The rest of the star core also broke into pieces like garbage. Thor, Loki, and Thea were all dumbfounded. I really didn't use any strength. She really wanted to explain, but looking at Thor's expression, she felt that it was better not to. At this time, Loki was already shouting for the Rainbow Bridge to pick them up. Thea waved her hand. Sorry, I'm afraid you've got the wrong person. I'll leave first. I'll come back in a few years. After saying that, she opened a portal and was about to go back. Before she left, she felt that crushing Thor's hammer would be very detrimental to their future cooperation. She turned her head and looked at him from inside out. She had to admit that this Thor was really weak. Without the hammer, he was even more useless. This is a little knowledge about the use of lightning in our world. Consider it as a hammer to accompany you. After saying that, she reached out and pointed, and a large piece of information entered the depths of Thor's soul. This was the way to use lightning that he extracted from old Shazan. It was passed down from Zeus, but it was not suitable for her. Now, she copied it as a favor. After sending the information, she did not wait for the two to speak and directly entered the portal. Vaguely, she seemed to have bumped into someone. The other party was also dressed in black. Judging from the body shape, it seemed to be a woman. The portal was very short. After brushing past the woman and a violent tremor, they finally returned to their original world. Are you okay? Diana asked nervously. The Valkyrie had already realized that the other side was a completely different world. It was completely different from their parallel universe. Thea took a deep breath. The original world was still the most comfortable. She looked at Jiao Tianzuan in annoyance. What's going on? Small mistake, small mistake. My life is too long. I've seen the rise and fall of the entire universe, the glory and fall of empires. Thea waved her hand and interrupted Jiao Tianzuan's boasting. She adjusted the time again. This time, she did not plan to go over by herself. If Superman had followed her just now, he would not have been able to beat her up. Of course, this beat was for Thor and his brother. For her, this level was not considered a battle. Superman's image and temperament were without a doubt. He was simply a moral role model among superheroes. No one would say that he was a bad person when they saw him. She knew her own family's situation. Her appearance now was a little far from being righteous. Diana strongly requested to go with her. Batman also looked like he wanted to go. The Flash and the others also wanted to go, but Thea stopped them. I'm afraid there's no power of speed there. Our Earth still needs your protection. The same goes for the green light. After rejecting their help, Thea, Diana, Superman, Batman, and Jiao Tianzuan stood in front of the portal. This time, they must bring this sly old man. Even if the time was wrong, they could adjust it there. Running back and forth between the two worlds was very uncomfortable for her. Moreover, when Jiao Tianzuan left, the observer would also return. This time, she didn't use the power of death to open the portal. The thing was dark and didn't look like justice at all. What's more, she was suppressed by Marvel's death. This time, she used the power of emotion. It was colorful and dazzling, and it seemed to work well. Stepping through the portal, except for Jiao Tianzuan who was relieved to return to his own world, the others, including Thea, had to readjust. Batman was an ordinary person. Any world had no effect on him. At this time, he was looking at the surrounding environment. Superman stretched his body and looked up at the sun. He found that it was no different from the other world. He was also relieved. The only trouble was Diana. Thea helped to calm the restless power in her body. After 10 minutes, it stabilized. Is there no courage in this world? Diana's courage power was sealed by Thea, but she could use perseverance and protection. Maybe the rules of the emotional spectrum are different. Emotions can be used normally, but courage alone is different from our world. Thea could only vaguely explain. Was there any green representative in Marvel? Hulk. That seemed to be the symbol of anger. It had nothing to do with courage. And the color of anger in their world was red. The source of emotion could be used because the range of emotion was large. Diana's courage didn't match here at all. With half of her strength gone, Diana was a little unhappy. She was suppressed and had to deal with an enemy stronger than ever before. It didn't feel good. Where is this? Diana asked Batman. I don't know. Batman's answer made them speechless. I didn't know you were so focused. The newspaper in the hand of the pedestrian in the distance is the New York Times. Someone is flying over from the northwest. Are we going to deal with him? Superman looked into the distance. Sia also looked over. It was a red metal shell, and there was an energy source emitting white light on his chest. Coupled with the fact that this was New York, it wasn't hard to guess who it was. It was Iron Man, Tony Stark. Chapter 1006. Thea casually looked at the Iron Man flying in the distance and looked away. She looked up outside the Earth, and with the return of Jiao Tianzuan, the observer also returned to this part of the Earth. It's just that Jiao Tianzuan's reaction made her feel a little strange. By right, when returning to the original world, there should be some information and energy flow between the main body and the projection, but Thea didn't feel anything, which was completely impossible. Unless Jiao Tianzuan was 2 levels higher than her. Thea was now at the multiverse level, and higher than her would be the peak of the multiverse and the omnipotent level. But did Jiao Tianzuan have this ability? She didn't believe it. Another possibility was that Jiao Tianzuan was a big liar, an American version of Qiu Qianzhong, but seeing that he could cross into her world, it didn't seem like it. Thea felt that the last possibility was very likely, and his main body was dead. Before she could ask, the Iron Man had flown in front of her. Tony Stark was a genius in the Marvel world, the representative of the superheroes, and similar to Thea's deeds there, he also revealed his superhero identity to ordinary people. He relied on various technological equipment and his Iron Man armor in battle, and could use his Iron Man armor to deal with 80% of the enemies. Today, he was doing experiments when he suddenly found several warning signals ringing, and the monitor showed that 5 unknown targets had appeared in New York. Aliens. This was his first thought, but after observation, he found that the people who came didn't have any violent aura. After the other party arrived, they looked around and didn't find any hostility in a short time. After thinking for a while, he informed several of his companions, and then without hesitation, he put on his armor and came to them. "Who are you? Why did you come to Earth?" The Iron Man floated more than 2 meters above the ground, and the energy in his palm was ready, but not released. He was fully alert, and at the same time, he looked at these strangers. This time, Thea didn't wear the Goddess of Death's outfit. Instead, she changed into her usual clothes. She wore a red woolen coat, cropped pants that revealed her white ankles, and a pair of pointed high heels. She originally had a satchel with her, but Diana frowned and put it away. He was dressed normally, but compared to the people around him, he looked abnormal. Superman, Batman, and Diana were all wearing battle suits. Gao Tianzuan was wearing a shiny golden robe inlaid with silver. He might look cool on his planet, but on Earth, he could only look very different and flashy. The Iron Man's eyes wandered over their faces. Gao Tianzuan looked strange and was obviously not a good person to talk to, so he was eliminated at the first moment. Diana carried a shield and a long sword, looking like she was about to enter the battlefield. Thea, a city beauty, was also very strange to be mixed in with a group of suspected aliens. Although both of them were super beautiful and very fierce, and he usually wouldn't mind chatting them up, at this time, he was still ready to put business first. Batman was even worse, dressed in black and habitually standing in the shadows. The Iron Man muttered for a while, "This guy wouldn't be a bad guy, right?" The Iron Man finally set his eyes on Superman. Intuition told him that this guy with a sunny face should be a good person. Thea didn't know what time period Marvel was in now, and she didn't care much about the life and death of Thanos. She gently pushed their righteous and handsome Superman, "You should speak on behalf of the company. We are from another Earth, and there is a major matter involving both of us that we need to discuss with you." Superman flew into the air and was level with the Iron Man, and said in a gentle tone. The strong man in the red cloak in front of him could fly without any equipment, which made the Iron Man more certain that the other party was an alien. However, after living for so long, he could still judge whether there was hostility or not. In addition, Superman's face was no less righteous than Captain America's, so the Iron Man temporarily put down his guard. "What's the matter?" He didn't mean to go back to the headquarters at all and was ready to talk on the street. Superman briefly said that he didn't trust the Iron Man to the extent that both sides were conducting preliminary tests. The Iron Man listened and didn't believe it, but his intuition told him that the matter was a bit big and he couldn't decide on his own. "Please come back to the headquarters with me to talk in detail." After that, the Iron Man hesitated. Could these guys in front of him all fly? If they couldn't fly, would he need to call a car from the headquarters? They should have seen cars before, right? Looking at Batman's Kevlar and Thea's clothes, judging from human clothing and polymer composite materials, the technology in this world shouldn't be bad. After that, he saw the two beauties fly up casually, and Gao Tianzuan, who seemed to be the old man, also followed with a frown. The three of them flew as casually as breathing and drinking water, and the dark Batman also wore a ring and followed behind with yellow light. "Heh!" The Iron Man was a little surprised. "These guys can fly." He hurriedly called the Avenger to gather in the exclusive channel. Regardless of whether the other party was a righteous hero or not, at least his side couldn't be too weak. The journey was a little far. This world's New York was very big, and it wasn't an exaggeration to say that it was a super metropolis. Almost 80% of the heroes and villains worked hard here. Sometimes, when a plane crashed, 7 or 8 heroes would jump out to rescue it. Thea scanned with her telepathic mind and saw a few very strong reactions. 3 of them were the most eye-catching. One was a pure and peaceful spiritual power. Thea guessed that it was Professor X. The other was in a small world, and the vast and surging energy was different from the DC world, but she could still recognize some of its characteristics. It was magic power, and if she wasn't wrong, it was Doctor Strange who was in the New York Sanctum. The last one was their destination, and Thea couldn't think of who it was for a moment. Avoiding the city, the group flew to the suburbs. After flying for half an hour, they came to the outside of a huge building complex. An irregular pentagonal building was the main building, and the members' daily rest and employees' work were all here. The air corridor connected to the military facilities at the back and the training ground. Thea also saw 2 famous Quinjet on the tarmac. Above the main building and the training ground, there was a large letter A. Superman was very curious, and asked what this A meant. "We call ourselves the Avenger Alliance, which is the acronym for Avengers." Tony answered the question very quickly. "We call ourselves the Justice League." Superman said proudly. The term Avengers referred to taking revenge on behalf of someone. This kind of action was a bit like exchanging violence for violence. Conceptually, their name was much more positive. Walking into the main building, they saw many ordinary people doing work. Thea also saw the third person that caught her interest. "You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,